hold that potentially to use as a bargaining chip to say to Moscow, well, we could give back some of your territory that we hold if you could give back some of our territory that you hold. However, Russian forces, often being supported by thousands of troops that have been sent to Russia by North Korea, have been fighting back against the Ukrainian offensive inside Kursk recently, even walking for miles through disused gas pipeline tunnels to be able to come up to the rear of Ukrainian forces and surprise them. Russia has taken back more than half of that territory originally seized by Ukraine, and so Ukraine will be really hoping to hold on to that, because if it doesn't, it loses that potential bargaining chip in any future negotiations with Russia. Leigh Ann?
Ross Cullen in Kyiv, thank you so much for joining me. For more on this, I'm joined by Saudi and US political expert Ahmed Ibrahim, who joins me now from Riyadh. Ahmed, good evening to you. Thank you for joining me. What's Saudi Arabia's role in the talks this week? We've already seen talks with the Russian and US delegation previously.
Well, definitely. The visit of Zelenskyy over here underscores the importance of Saudi Arabia being the mediator and basically filling the gaps of the communication is happening. And hopefully it would reach some sort of a restart of going forward with this kind of negotiation or the peace negotiation that's it's going to happen. So we have the first time, we have the Americans meeting the Russians, and today we have the Americans are meeting the Ukrainians. So I think there is some deals on the table. There is some issues with Ukraine from the American part. It also needs to be resolved, which is basically we did not see that in the first meeting between the Russians and the Americans. So now it's the ball is in the court of the Ukrainians. They have some demands, they have some sticking points, and Saudi Arabia is trying basically to knock some sense in the all parties so they can basically come to a conclusion and have some a roadmap for a good peace talk in the future.
What are the major sticking points expected to be during the talks tomorrow? You just mentioned there some of the things that Saudi has to help mediate.
Well, definitely what comes to my mind, there is probably 4 sticking points. The first one is the territorial issue with Ukraine. Ukraine still believes that Russia needs to withdraw from some of the geographical area that was conquered by the Russians, and these are non-negotiable. And Russia is also at the same point. So this is also Saudi Arabia needs to work and mediate these kind of things with the allied parties that they're going to negotiate this peace between Ukraine and Russia. The second thing is the security guaranteed. We all understand that the Minsk accord has been violated, and Ukraine does not want this to happen, and they want some guarantees into the future. Wherein the Russians, they want some guarantees for point number 3. They don't want any NATO involvement in Ukraine. They want Ukraine to be basically withdrawn from all NATO's agreement, and there is no future probably application that's going to be submitted, and this has to be guaranteed to the Russians in order to basically move forward with the peace plan. And the last point probably is the economy or probably the relief, the sanction and the relief for the Russians. They are looking forward to remove all these kind of sanction on Russia, and the West and Ukraine is actually seeing these sanction is a bargaining tool or a way to basically bend the Russians in order to come into terms.
The Saudi Crown Prince will meet Marco Rubio and also Zelenskyy ahead of the talks. How will hosting these meetings and a lot of the peace talks help to raise Saudi Arabia's profile geopolitically?
Well, definitely, to be honest with you, it's not an easy job for MBS to basically try to bring this deal, but it seems it's going forward and they keep coming back to Saudi Arabia. As you know, Saudi Arabia has been, standing in a very neutral way between Russia, between Ukraine, and I think this is the best geographical spot for them to mediate this and to have peace. Saudi has been showing for the past years their capability and their international influence. MBS personally, he has been a peace man. He zeroed all his problems in the region, and the biggest one is with Iran. Actually, he negotiated releasing the Ukrainian and the American hostages from Russia. So definitely this is going to be a hard job on MBS. He needs to fill the gaps. He needs to bring the ideas together on the ground, and he needs to play the role of mediation. Now, having said all that, if this goes well and this peace process comes into term in Saudi Arabia, this is going to position Saudi Arabia with the leading MBS to the whole world as being the spot of, knocking some sense and bring peace to the world. And this is definitely going to put so much weight to Saudi Arabia in the international community.
Ahmed Ibrahim, Saudi and US political expert, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines today. Israel has stopped supplying electricity to the Gaza Strip a week after blocking all aid into Palestinian territory. Energy Minister Cohen said Israel would use all the tools at their disposal to bring back the hostages and ensure Hamas is no longer in Gaza the day after. It comes ahead of fresh talks in Qatar regarding an extension to the ceasefire. An oil tanker and cargo ship have collided off the Lincolnshire coast of the UK, with 32 casualties reported. The tanker caught fire with lifeboats and helicopters deployed to the scene. The Lara Ali have reported that a number of people have abandoned the vessels. Over 40,000 people in Germany have been affected by a surprise strike closing Hamburg airport. The walkouts began yesterday morning, giving short notice to passengers who were told to stay away from the terminals. Hamburg airport said only 10 of 280 departures and arrivals went ahead as scheduled on Sunday. And a British man has been charged in London after climbing the Tower of Big Ben. 29-year-old Daniel Day appeared in court facing allegations of intentionally or recklessly causing a public nuisance and trespassing on a protected site. Day was carrying a Palestinian flag and was stood on the ledge of the London landmark for more than 16 hours before he was removed. Now to Canada, where Mark Carney has been announced as Justin Trudeau's successor as the country's Prime Minister. The former governor of the Canadian Central Bank and of the Bank of England triumphed over three other political candidates in the Liberal Party's leadership race. Carney has been an outspoken person on President Trump's imposed tariffs on Canada and his comments about making the country's America's 51st state. Sarah Firth has been following this story for us.
Fighting talk from Canada's Mark Carney, just moments after he's announced as the country's new incoming Prime Minister.
America is not Canada, and Canada never, ever will be part of America in any way, shape, or form.
The rhetoric, no surprise, given the unfolding trade war sparked by Trump's claims Canada is ripping Americans off.
Because Canada has been ripping us off for years. Nobody ever talks about that. 250% tariff, which is taking advantage of our farmers, so that's not going to happen anymore. They'll be met with the exact same tariff unless they drop it. And that's what reciprocal means.
This week, Trump is still set to impose a 25% tariff on steel and aluminium imports, of which Canada in particular is a major exporter of to the United States. Carney, though, vowing his priority will be to come up with a plan to build a stronger Canadian economy and to create new trading relationships with what he says will be reliable trading partners.
There's someone who's trying to weaken our economy. Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, as we know, has put, as the Prime Minister just said, unjustified tariffs on what we build, on what we sell, on how we make a living. He's attacking Canadian families, workers, and businesses, and we cannot let him succeed. And we won't. We won't.
Outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, though, leaving with a warning about the economic crisis and calling these dark days brought on by Canada's neighbour.
And make no mistake, this is a nation-defining moment. Democracy is not a given. Freedom is not a given. Even Canada is not a given.
Canada strong. That was the incoming leader's main message. The Canadian government has already retaliated with their own tariff threats, which the new PM claims will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impact in Canada. But as sparks continue to fly in this increasingly heated trade war between the neighbouring countries, both leaders are vowing to win. One thing, though, is already clear. Right now, it's the American and Canadian people feeling the impact. Sarah Firth, Al Arabiya.
The US has defended its recent meeting with Hamas as the Trump administration attempts to bring the hostilities in Gaza to a close. Talks for the second phase of the ceasefire are due to resume in Qatar this week. US envoy for hostages Adam Borla told Al Arabiya News he is optimistic about their conversation and the return of the remaining hostages.
The reason that I met with Hamas like that is because I'm a big believer in dialogue. I think that through dialogue, one gets to understand various people. And I think the meetings with Hamas gave me some hope. One, it gave me hope that there would eventually be an end to something that's not productive for many countries. It gave me hope that there would be an opportunity to rebuild Gaza, and that there was some flexibility on the Hamas side where there wasn't. So I know there's talks going on this week, but I'm cautiously optimistic about some advances, and especially about some hostages coming out. And I thought from the conversation that there was possibility to get something done in a way that would work for the region. I did believe that. Now, it's very easy to say that. It's very different to do it. And part of my belief, because one of the questions becomes, how do you set it up so that Hamas doesn't rearm? Well, I need to trust probably a pan-Arab force to do that. Now, do I trust them? I'll tell you something. Yeah, we've had a long history with modern Arab countries, and I know that certain countries, if they tell me something, they're going to do it, and they're going to do it well.
The Syrian Defense Ministry says an operation against Assad loyalists is now over. Revenge attacks have taken place in Syria's Alawite community over the weekend, killing over 1,000 civilians, including women and children, in so-called field executions. Those belonging to the Alawite group were once empowered by former President Bashar al-Assad, who was ousted last November after opposition groups took over. It's believed the violence is amongst the deadliest since the conflict in Syria began 14 years ago, with parts of the region left without electricity and drinking water. Let's take a look at the top business news now. JP Morgan has joined Wall Street peer Goldman Sachs to forecast a boost to the euro area's economic growth for 2025 on the back of Germany's fiscal loosening reforms. Similar to Goldman, the brokerage expects growth to increase by 0.1 percentage point to 0.8%. However, JP Morgan is cautioning uncertainty from Trump's tariff policy could likely weigh on economic growth in the coming months. President Trump says his administration is in touch with 4 different groups about the sale of Chinese-owned social media platform TikTok. The fate of TikTok has been uncertain since a law requiring its owner, ByteDance, to either sell it on national security grounds or face a ban that took effect in January. Trump signed an executive order seeking to delay the enforcement of the law by 75 days. Turning to sports news now. Former Newcastle United and Fulham forward Alexander Mitrovic missed training with Al Hilal because of an abnormal heart rhythm. Local media have reported that the 30-year-old was taken to hospital after scoring for the Saudi Pro League champions on Friday. Mitrovic had just returned from a hamstring injury that had kept him out of action since January. And Dutch athlete Maureen Koster suffered a fall and was knocked unconscious during the women's 3,000 metres at the European Indoor Championship in the Netherlands. Koster, who won silver in 2015 and had finished second in the qualifying race, was treated by medical staff next to the track on Sunday. The 32-year-old was later transported to hospital. Her team now say she is conscious and responsive. A reminder of our top stories. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy insists Ukraine striving for peace a day before crucial talks with the US in Saudi Arabia. Canada's next Prime Minister Mark Carney vows to win the trade war with President Donald Trump. The Syrian Defense Ministry says an operation against Assad loyalists is now over as the death toll from Syrian clashes and revenge killings reaches over 1,000 people. That's all from us on W News. Thank you so much for joining us. A special interview with the CEO of Dow Jones is coming up next. And don't miss Tom Burges Watson with GNT. Good night and thank you for joining us.
Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News.
It's very impressive.
Where knowledge meets perspective.
Hello from the sidelines of the World Government Summit here in Dubai. Welcome to Arabiya News. I'm here with Almar Latour, who is the CEO of Dow Jones and Company. Very warm welcome to you. Of course, amongst other titles, Dow Jones is the publishing firm behind the Wall Street Journal, MarketWatch, Financial News. Dow Jones is, of course, owned by News Corp. So it's great to have you with us. Welcome to the region. The Middle East has seen some major transformations in recent years, economically speaking in particular. I'd just like to ask you what you've seen and what you feel when you come here in terms of that transformation?
Well, let me start right there. There is a tremendous sense of energy, of innovation. There's a real vibe of the possible that I'm picking up wherever I go here. Over the past few days, we spent time here at the World Government Summit. There's a lot of deal making happening, a lot of future forward thinking and talking and doing, and that's unique. That vibrancy. Travel all over the world. Those happen at special moments in time when there's a confluence of capital, of ideas, of a sense of the possible, and a global stage that's enabling it. And so that's really remarkable, and that's why I'm here the third time in 14 months.
And obviously diversification away from dependency on oil is a big mantra in many countries in the region. What are you reporting on, for example, in the Wall Street Journal? What sort of sectors are you seeing that transition in most prevalently?
Yeah, so for the newsroom, our reporters and editors have to decide that on a day-by-day basis. But here are the things that are important to us. Anything that moves the global business community forward. And so, of course, that's energy and all the changes that take place in the field of energy. Technology, which is a huge part here of the World Government Summit, of Dubai, of Abu Dhabi, of the region. AI within that, which has such an enormous impact on the world right now, and the region and the UAE here right now play a very special role inside that in accommodating energy, but also technology and entrepreneurship. There's a lot of capital flowing in, so we're at the core of business and finance, a publishing house and information service really to help people make decisions. And so there's a lot of capital flowing into this region, a lot of capital coming out. There's just a lot of interaction on the business scene, and that's where we gravitate. We need to be here to inform businesses here and decision makers here, whether you are in the middle of your career and you want to understand how do I advance, how do I build a business, how do I advance my career, or whether you're a decision maker running a company or running a part of a government, we are going to help you make those decisions by offering you reliable information. That's one. Two, we have to inform the outside world as to what's going on here, and you can't really appreciate it unless you're on the ground, and you know that yourself. You've been here 7 months?
Yes, indeed, but you haven't mentioned crypto, and I thought you'd have mentioned it a bit earlier on. Are you seeing this region become something of a global hub for cryptocurrency exchanges, for cryptocurrencies themselves?
Well, clearly there's a lot of activity around it, and it being an important factor in financial life. There being a lot of unanswered questions still as to what, for example, the U.S. administration is going to do around it, and whether it will be enabling for crypto to take a firmer hold, which is part of the expectation. We are going to narrate that. We're going to emphasize that. I put that under the bucket of capital and technology and innovation, and so it's definitely something that we are paying close attention to.
Okay, so that's the economic side of things in terms of the influence of the Middle East region. Geopolitically, how are you seeing the evolution of the importance of this region?
Yeah, clearly the region and the world really is at some pivot point. There's a lot of action that happened in the past couple of weeks, and we are doing exactly what we need to do, which is to report the facts, to help create an understanding as to what is happening in Washington, what the latest thinking is there. We have done that for more than a century, and so we understand, our reporters understand, our analysts understand, our employee base understands that this is a very special moment in time, and there's a lot of movement. You got, again, this confluence of circumstances where there is an administration that is ready to act, that is moving forward on the geopolitical front, but also on the domestic front. You don't see action like this very often. And we've sensed that. You've been here all week. You've sensed that even this week in the response to various thoughts that are coming out of Washington.
Just before we move on from talking about the Middle East region, I just want to ask you whether Dow Jones and Company has any plans to expand in this region.
Oh, well, Thank you for asking that. We absolutely do. We've already announced recently that we are expanding a presence in Qatar. We are bringing one of our franchises, WSJ Tech Live, to the region to help explain the tech story. We have a beautiful office here in Dubai, and there is a realization that if we want to reflect the world as it is, we need to rebalance our portfolio and make sure that the Gulf region is properly represented, which is part of the reason why I'm coming a lot, why a lot of colleagues are coming as well. And so we anticipate a very fruitful journey forward. Wherever there's action, wherever the business community is active, and certainly as intensely as here, that's where we come in. This is like our sweet spot, and so expect us to be more vociferous and more present with facts and analysis.
You are a career journalist and a media executive. You've mentioned artificial intelligence already. Is this something you think we journalists and the media should perhaps be worried about? Does it threaten us?
I don't want to approach new technology as a threat. I've covered technology as a reporter. I've covered the rise of mobile technology and the implications, the wide implications that it has had for all of us. I was a tech bureau chief, and so I am paying very close attention to what it's doing to journalism. There are a couple of things that need to be sorted out. One, your company, my company, a lot of media companies have built up archives, have built up basically intellectual property or unique reporting. Costs money. We're investing in that. That's why people tune into you. That's why people come to the Wall Street Journal or come to Barron's. We have to make sure that that doesn't just get hoovered up by a platform for use in a learning model. And so the way we are responding to that is to say, let's make commercial deals and make sure that the value of that is addressed. If the value of that is not addressed and still we believe that our content is not being used in an appropriate way, then we will take action in court, as we already have done. That's one part, and I would say that is just a precondition, but it's not the only part. There's efficiency and then new products, and that's where the excitement is.
Yeah, but I mean, you say you've covered other technological advances over the years, but this one is so different in the sense that it can actually do our jobs for us as journalists. Therefore, you know, a lot of people will be thinking AI is a major threat to journalists and therefore to journalism.
Well, I think it will create a lot of space and a lot of efficiency. For example, I had to give a talk the other day in a different language, and normally, like if you have to translate that, or if you're fluent in language, it takes a while to translate that. To do it like that is actually very enabling. It created a lot more time, so I could make sure that whatever I was communicating, it was even more precise, more sophisticated, and it created bandwidth. Now, it's similar for working in a newsroom, whether you're translating or whether you're working on a story. You can take some monotonous jobs, make them shorter, make them faster, so you can focus on the value add. So that's what I think will work like for journalists on the ground, but that's also how it works for the value chain. Namely, if we can focus on creating premium products that have very, very deep proprietary data, unique reporting. This is not going to go away, the ability to connect human to human and extract something of real value. If you can focus on that, do more of that, and then resurface it with AI in new ways, then I believe that there's a lot of value. We've already launched several new products that are generative AI driven. Those are driving profitable business for us. We expect that to continue.
Earlier this week, of course, there was the AI summit in Paris. The UK and the United States decided not to sign this international agreement on AI at that summit. Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, was there, said too much regulation would stifle growth in this brand new sector. Is he right?
Well, it's not my job to review the Vice President of the United States. I'll leave that to our opinion pages. I'll leave it to our reporters to assess what the Vice President has said there. As a business leader, I want to make sure that we have enough bandwidth to do the things that are accretive, that are going to help our customers, but I also want to make sure that what we have built so painstakingly over the years is protected. And so those are the two angles that I would look at, but let the politicians figure things out.
So just to sum up our discussion about AI, is the Wall Street Journal, are the Dow Jones Company publications embracing it, would you say, or feeling somewhat intimidated by it?
No, we are embracing it. People are experimenting with it, but we're also building and we're investing in it. And there's really no way to sidestep this. You cannot allow an organization to be built for the past. You got to build it for the future, and everybody's got to lean into that. That's true for us. It's true for our newsroom. It's true for our data scientists. It's true for our B2B products. And so across the board, we are very heavily leaning into it.
You joined the Wall Street Journal in 1995.
You're revealing that to the world?
The very beginnings of the internet, of course, 1995.
Yes.
And you've seen an incredible transformation of our industry over these last precisely 30 years. Are you concerned at the moment about press freedoms? And with regard to press freedoms, I'm particularly interested to see how you feel about how things are shaping up in the United States.
Yeah, so press freedom is a priority for us. Obviously, we had, as you have followed yourself, we had a reporter who was incarcerated. We believed that, strongly believed that he was wrongfully detained. I and so many others fought hard to make sure that he would eventually be released. And so that alone gave us a spotlight at a very personal level as to the sacrifices that some journalists make to tell a story and share facts. And so that's incredibly important to make sure that that's supported and underscored.
And for the benefit of our viewers, if you could just let us know who you're talking about.
This is Evan Gershkovich. He was a reporter who wrote about Russia. Very accomplished, a lot of foresight in his reporting, and he luckily was released last year after a year and a half of being incarcerated.
That's obviously in Russia, but what about in the United States? Are you seeing any shift in terms of press freedoms? Are you having to do more to protect your journalists in an environment where if you say something someone doesn't like, and I'm talking about people in senior levels of governance in the country, they risk lawsuits?
Yeah, I have repeatedly said that we should not embrace hysteria around this. I think we've got to focus on the facts. We've got to focus on reporting. We got to do that day by day. There's a lot to cover. If the press or people at the Wall Street Journal, if we make a mistake, we have to correct, and that's an age-old policy, and that's what we have to live by. That's the contribution that we make to society, and we got to just commit to that. So we're investing in journalism, in fact-based journalism. We think that reliable information is just something pretty unique these days that adds value to people's lives and to their decision-making power. If people disagree with what we write, then if we believe that we're right, then we will back our reporters, back our reporting, and if that has to happen in a court of law, then we have done that many times.
And in this era of fake news, disinformation, misinformation, all of it, of course, amplified by social media, obviously accurate reporting is more important than ever before. Do you think there's been a breakdown in trust between the public and the media? And if so, what are you doing about it?
Yeah, I think the best thing you can do about it is owning up to mistakes and being factual and prove again and again that you are contributing to people's understanding, not taint factual reporting with opinion. Make clear that opinion, in our case, opinions and a forum of opinions is clearly separated from news. And so that's how we make our contribution in the area that we control, and that's the biggest contribution that we can make.
So in your capacity as CEO of Dow Jones, do you see it as your role to try and fix this breakdown in trust?
I see it as our role to contribute to an understanding of society, to make sure that factual reporting is spread far and wide. I also see that as a business leader, I see that as a tremendous business opportunity, because there's a lot of doom and gloom around media, including around trust. but the demand for reliable information is huge, which is why we had our best year in history last year, because so many people actually want reliable news. And so if you are if you are capable of delivering reliable news, then you can meet that demand, and there's an outsized opportunity. And the more noise there is, the more you stand out, and in that sense, this is very good times for us.
Okay, well, reassuring words there on the future of our industry, the media. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Almar Latour, the CEO of Dow Jones, thank you very much indeed to you. And thanks to you for watching. Do stay with us here on Arabiya News.
Sydney, Australia's largest city, is often dubbed as one of the most beautiful in the world. The place offers an attractive mix of modern architecture, historical landmarks, breathtaking views, relaxing gardens, and more. What are the top spots to see in Sydney? Perhaps Australia's most famous man-made attraction, and a worldwide icon too, is the Sydney Opera House. The structure alone is already a unique feat of architectural design and engineering. While built from innovation, creativity, and quite a bit of controversy, the Sydney Opera House remains a remarkable building that's home to over 1,500 performances a year and inviting up to 1.2 million audiences each time. One of the most well-maintained and well-preserved examples of colonial-style architecture in Australia is Sydney's Government House. Since its construction in 1846, it has been home to 27 governors and today remains one of the city's hidden gems, with interiors characteristic of its Gothic influence. Located nearby is the Royal Botanic Gardens, which offers a bevy of colors that's a sight to see in any season. It is kept alive with birds such as cockatoos and sleeping flying foxes that hang from branches, among many other natural wonders. The Australian National Maritime Museum is known for its sensational displays of the country's maritime heritage. Exhibits on display range from full-size to scale ships, an authentic submarine, and other relics of shipping history. The iconic Queen Victoria building is Sydney's ultimate shopping hub. As the building itself is an architectural marvel that boasts of fine details, craftsmanship, and style, it gives tourists an elegant and high-end shopping experience. Worth the hike is Sydney's Blue Mountains, located in New South Wales. Its blue haze horizon offers a breathtaking view and the perfect escape from the busy city. It's a great way to appreciate the scenery, wildlife, and mountain surroundings. Australia's Bondi Beach is known as the most popular in the country. It's close to the suburbs and easily accessible, which allows tourists and locals alike a spontaneous visit. Its great sand and clean waters are what make the beach a popular hotspot.
Hello and welcome to this special interview on Arabiya News. I'm Joanne Syria. Artificial intelligence is changing the way we live, work, and even think. From self-driving cars to chatbots that can hold human-like conversations, AI is no longer science fiction. It's our reality. But what does this mean for the lives we're living now and for our future? Can it take over our lives, or is it simply a tool to make our lives better? To get more insights on this, I'm joined by Manolis Kellis, professor of artificial intelligence and computer science at MIT. Professor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Joanna, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. To start, how would you describe artificial intelligence as it is today?
Artificial intelligence has really come a long way. It used to be faking intelligence. In other words, the humans will program every type of behavior and just simply pull the right behavior based on the circumstance, making the system seem intelligent when the system was not actually understanding anything. This changed dramatically with generative AI, with foundation models, with deep learning, and with multimodal understanding of the world. And I would say that AI has really come an enormous amount in terms of its progress. And it is surpassing human capabilities in many, many tasks already. Tasks that we once thought as intelligent have been completely wiped out by AI, pushing the boundary of what we call intelligent to more and more human-specific tasks. And therefore, the definition of artificial intelligence has changed to match the growing capabilities of these computer neuronal systems. And I would say that today, artificial intelligence has met every standard that we have set in the past and surpassed it. So we have narrowed down the definition to things that are more inherently human. But the challenge with this changing definition is that those things are also found in some of our animal relatives. For example, the emotional warmth, the care, the family values, and so on, are found in many of our animal relatives, thereby diminishing the uniqueness, if you wish, of human capabilities to this general ability to reason in a multimodal way, this common sense, this grounding, which I would say is really the last frontier of artificial and general intelligence at this point.
Should we worry that reliance on AI, artificial intelligence, might diminish human interaction?
I would say on the contrary. Right now, humans are spending an enormous amount dealing with mundane tasks, dealing with paperwork, dealing with minutes from meetings, dealing with, filling out tasks that are quite mundane. By having AI agents and avatars being able to take care of those tasks, of the more professional, the more mundane, the more, systematic and brutal and repetitive, you can now free up human creativity for more challenging tasks that really require this general intelligence that we still are unique in having. But at the same time, it can free up people to spend perhaps a little bit more time with their families, a little bit more time taking care of the elderly, taking care of their children, spending time with their loved ones. So I think that by automating a lot of the needs of our time at our work and in other sort of more mundane tasks, we can actually free up more of our time for more human interactions. And therefore, it can be a net positive thing. Now, the question is, when I meet with my students, what matters more? Does it matter more that I give them solid advice about their own work and their research? Or does it matter more that it's the physical me? Because if I train an avatar based on thousands of hours of interactions with my own students, and it is able to give very good advice that can sort of untangle them in their own research based on whatever problem is at hand, based on my own thinking and philosophy about how we do research, and my own advice that I've given to many other students before, and it's able to pull this advice selectively for the problem at hand, then one could argue that I'm limiting human interaction, but one could argue also that I can be available for hundreds of students instead of the small number that any one professor can supervise at a time. So it's a trade-off.
So would you say AI has the potential to enhance human values, or could it risk eroding them?
This is also a very, very interesting question. Basically, I believe that AI can help us overcome some of the evolutionary impulses that we have. Humans have evolved from our relatives that are still around us, like basically, we share many common principles with all of the animal kingdom. These principles are of survival, of nutrition, of reproduction, of protection of our kin. And these can manifest in beautiful ways, but these can also manifest in wars and brutality and killing and aggression and jealousy and all kinds of these values that as humans we are constantly trying to overcome. So this evolutionary origin of humans and these evolutionary principles that have led to the survival of our species are unfortunately ingrained inside us. And they are unfortunately limiting our behavior to some more impulses and urges that sometimes we're not very proud of. And the growth of our neocortex, the frontal cortex that is able to sort of be a more reasoning part of our brain and control the limbic system, the subcortical parts of our brain, is something that we have been valuing and rewarding through the Renaissance, through these human values of altruism, of taking care of not just our immediate kin, but appreciating all humans, regardless of their religion, their country of origin, their political affiliations, and so on and so forth. So I believe that AI can continue this move towards the more intellectual, towards the more pure values that we value as humans. And the question is, will the AI feel it or will it just pretend? And my answer to that, it might not matter. Do you prefer a doctor who will do absolutely the right thing and pretend to be empathetic? Or do you prefer a doctor who is more empathetic, but sometimes will make mistakes and do the wrong thing? And similarly for a professor, or you could even say for a parent. Does it matter if your parent absolutely loves you, if they're never there and they're never able to provide any of your needs? And does it matter if the parent doesn't really love you, but does everything as if they are the best parent in the world? And is able to fake this empathy and this warmth that every child needs. So if AI is able to meet all of these needs and is able to sort of help us achieve a higher standard for ourselves, for what it means to be warm and empathetic and generous and altruistic and caring for all human beings, then I believe AI can truly lift humanity past these more animal-like urges of competition and aggressivity towards the more humane values of warmth, empathy, and generosity.
So you touched on this a bit in your previous answer. In your opinion, what is the impact of AI on our collective evolution as a species?
So I would say that there has been a continuity in the evolution of humanity. If you look at nearly every metric of poverty, of crime, of nutrition, of health, of lifespan, of health span, of child survival rate, every single one of these metrics has been improving throughout the world. We still have a lot of work to do. There are still many places in the world where a child is not guaranteed to have an education, is not guaranteed to have, shelter, sufficient healthy nutrition, a future, a long lifespan. And we still have a lot of work to do. But if you compare to any previous time in the history of humanity, things have been getting better for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I think that this move towards a wealthier, healthier, calmer future is getting closer. And I think that these capabilities of AI can help us overcome many of the challenges that we're facing today. Many of these challenges are due to scarce resources. They're due to limited wealth. They're due to limited time. They're due to limited capabilities. And I think if every child grows up with an AI assistant, a tutor that is able to guide them intellectually, emotionally, strategically, making the right decisions, being always kind, always patient, always generous, always guiding them and nudging them in the right direction, I think that this can transform education. Instead of having every teacher be required to know all of the human knowledge that every student in their classroom will need, which is nearly impossible, because some of those students might be geniuses, might be able to surpass their teachers tenfold, 100-fold, and therefore limiting what the student learns to whatever the teacher knows limits the maximum capability of the students. If instead you empower the most caring and empathetic and warm teacher, the most curious, the teachers who are willing to sit alongside the students and learn with them, and instead of the student asking the teacher the question and the teacher saying, oh, that's outside the course, or, oh, we're not going to cover that now, or, oh, you know, this question is not something that we should address. Instead, if the teacher says, wow, that's a great question, let's sit down together and learn about it. And if the teacher has the same curiosity, then that opens the realm of teachers to not just the people who have the most knowledge, but to the people who are willing to sit along with the students and learn with them. And then suddenly we can have many, many more teachers. And we can augment these teachers with AI tutors who can help the students learn and surpass their own teachers. So as I'm sitting and learning with my children, this is exactly the attitude that I have, where I'm like, well, you know, here's what I know about this, but let's find out a lot more. And there's countless resources on YouTube, with videos online, on Wikipedia, with articles, and of course with ChatGPT and all of these other AI avatars that are able to respond to very detailed questions. Hey, this and that don't make sense together. Why? And you're not going to find an article already written on the internet for that. But having an AI tutor, an AI chatbot, an AI avatar, an AI agent who's able to interact with both the teacher and the parent and the student, I think will basically lift us across the world. So I think that there's, of course, a lot of misery. There's a lot of challenge. There's a lot of struggles. There's a lot of war and tension in the world today. But some of that can be alleviated by lifting everybody up, by teaching from an early age kindness and generosity and altruism, but also pushing for excellence, bringing the best out of every student, helping every student achieve their maximum potential. I think it's something that I'm really, really looking forward to.
So how do you see AI affecting our personal lives? So whether at work, for example, or even our own relationships?
I see it changing every aspect of our lives, at work, at home, with our children, with our parents, with the elderly. Imagine if every elderly person sitting in a nursing home had an AI avatar with face and, you know, emotional reactions and voice and kindness and warmth to sit with them and chat every day. Imagine if we have every child similarly in their home, in their room, having an AI agent that is able to say, listen, you know, you have 5 minutes to play that video game, but after that, let's get back to your homework, okay? And, you know, encouraging them and nudging them again in the right direction. There's, of course, a lot of sci-fi movies that are painting the worst possible scenarios with AI, where AI is like invading every aspect of our privacy and controlling us and manipulating us for its own benefit. But this is a lot of anthropomorphizing of AI. This is projecting a lot of our evolutionary quirks that got us where we are. These, you know, egocentricity and this, you know, self-preservation and this competition and this sort of protection of kin at the detriment of others that were absolutely necessary to our own evolution and to us making it so far. But AI doesn't have to have these needs. AI doesn't have a self. AI doesn't have this evolutionary strive for survival, for domination, for ruling, and so on and so forth. And it is up to us to choose whether we want to program it into the AI or not. But it's not going to come up with it on its own if we limit the capabilities of AI systems to answer tasks that are provided by humans. Then the only thing that we need to worry about is the humans. And of course, the question is, well, won't humans use AI for malicious goals? The answer is absolutely yes. You know, this is part of human nature. There are people who will have nefarious goals and who will use AI for either evil or for something that they think is good, but others will perceive as evil. And to that, I say, well, it comes back to the presence of any type of tool. In other words, being able to have more and more powerful computers, more and more powerful, nuclear power, more and more powerful, mobility and vehicles and so on and so forth. All of that is part of the technological progress. And a knife can be extremely helpful in, everything, in using, cutting your food, in, opening boxes and all kinds of other stuff. But it can also be a very dangerous weapon in the hands of the wrong person. And a knife can kill a person, but that doesn't mean we should outlaw knives. What we should do is provide protection against people who will want to use them for harm. And it's the same thing with AI. We need to have some barriers that will prevent the AI from, carrying out malicious, tasks. And we need to also have multiple types of AI and multiple AI systems that will basically, serve as shields against each other. But I think and of course the ethical question becomes, what do you call harm? Is harm for one side of a conflict, the definition, is it up to the other side of the conflict to define what harm means? And I think that's something that, we together as a species and as a community and as a society, as a global society, I should say, should come to define these limits of someone's freedom, which, as the French would say, my freedom ends where your freedom begins. So you can't have infinite freedom for every person. You have to sort of have boundaries for any of that.
So what fields do you think have benefited the most from AI so far?
The list is countless. It's extraordinary. I think every aspect of science is extraordinarily benefiting from AI right now. So we're able to understand the language of DNA. We're able to understand the language of protein folding, of chemistry, of patient states and patient trajectories. We're able to understand medicine and healthcare interventions at a level unprecedented in the history of science. And in my daily work, we're using AI to bring together all of these different facets of biological function, of medical intervention, of disease manifestation, progression, and onset, and of treatment, again, design, production, and administration, to be able to advance human health at a level that is unprecedented. And I see AI's impact on human health and on the human condition as one of the longest lasting impacts of AI, and perhaps one of the greatest changes that our species will undergo, to be able to take care of the human body, of the human mind, of the human brain, of the human physiology, human immune system, and so on and so forth, at levels that are unprecedented and unimaginable right now. So we're able to uncover the pathways and the mechanisms underlying every aspect of human disease, understand interventions that can modulate each of these processes to restore health and sometimes surpass what we call healthy now with super health and super longevity and so on and so forth. And I think that this will be extraordinary. Beyond just medicine, health, biology, chemistry, there, manufacturing, architecture, climate, food production, animal welfare, and all of these things are areas that AI can and is truly having an enormous impact. So I think that every aspect of science, engineering, manufacturing, design is absolutely touched and reshaped by AI.
I want to talk to you a little bit about AI in education. Some students are using AI tools in an ethical manner. You did mention this earlier, to learn more, to see more information that's not available in the classroom, for example. But some have been using AI to do their own assignments or even write research papers for them. How is AI affecting education in that way and the future of graduates and even professionals in various fields?
This is an enormous concern. And one possibility is that the types of assignments that we give to students are so complex that using AI is part of the only way to solve them. Namely, being able to use critical thinking, being able to sort of reason your thoughts, being able to use this, use all of these capabilities to go far beyond what any student their age would be able to do. There's another approach to education, which is goal-oriented. Namely, I'm currently working with about 40 high school students across the world, including the Middle East, where we are designing the next generation of AI systems. And those students are programming at the level of engineer with 20 years of experience. And every one of these students meets with me multiple times a week. And they work together as a team to advance the state of the art of data science and medicine and AI. And of course, I tell them, use ChatGPT for everything. And they're able to, of course, use ChatGPT, but it takes a huge amount of human reasoning to figure out what exactly I should ask the AI to help me with. And those students are 16 years old and achieving things that a 40-year-old engineer would be very proud of achieving week after week after week. So if we change education to be more goal-oriented and project-driven, where they have a goal, they have a mission, and they're doing their learning on the way to that mission, then AI becomes a friend, not a cheating tool. AI becomes a necessary ally, not the easy way out. Now, there's another aspect, of course, where they have to learn some basic foundational tools. You can teach them in the classroom with traditional approaches and an essay that they go off and and write at home, or you could make the AI part of that solution. You could basically say, "Hey, what are the top 3 thoughts that come to mind?" Bang, bang, bang. Listen, like 1 and 3 are very reasonable, but 2 is a little off topic. Can you think of a couple more? And then the student will sort of interact with AI and say, "Yeah, you're kind of right. What about this and that?" They're like, yeah, that's good, but can you combine them perhaps in a more interesting thing? Okay, now let's structure your essay. Remember, the first thing that you need to do is come up with an outline. Can you come up with an outline? And then you do that. And then the AI becomes the tutor working with the student at home rather than the cheating tool. "Oh, can you please write this essay for me?" And then the student needs to submit as part of their homework the entire transcript of the interaction that they had with the AI. So that the teacher sees that it's not just, "Hey, can you please write this essay for me?" And then suddenly you're able to augment the student experience to go beyond what was previously possible. And you have this tutoring happening throughout. And of course, there are ways to monitor the interactions of a student with the AI system. And, the parents have to sign off on this, and you have to, have certain controls on the computer, on the account, etc. But faking all of that for the student, yes, it's possible, but the act of faking it will have the end result of still learning that process of writing an essay, writing a paper, solving a challenge, and so forth. And I think that we need to also prepare students not for a world before AI. We need to prepare students for the world today. In other words, instead of asking the students to multiply 2 very large numbers, which is frankly useless, in any foreseeable future world, you ask the students to solve much more interesting questions. So I think that part of the disconnect is that we have an educational system that was designed 150 years ago with techniques that are literally from the future. And preparing the students for today's world requires the rethinking the type of education, the type of skills, the type of jobs that these students will have. And perhaps respecting them a little bit more as adults and giving them tasks that sometimes the teacher thinks are impossible, which is, I have to admit, something that I do with my high school students that I work with. I will make suggestions about things that I think will take months, and they'll come back in days and say, yeah, I tried this and I found this new tool and I found this new capability and, you know, I have it. And I am constantly blown away, not just for what a 16-year-old can achieve, but for what anyone of any age can achieve in such a small amount of time.
So how close are we, would you say, to achieving sentient AI or superintelligence? So could we see AI that possesses self-awareness, emotions, or even consciousness? And what kind of impact will this have on humans if that happens?
The question is, A, whether we want that or not. And I want to distinguish different types of AGI. I mean, like a lot of people are thinking of superintelligence as necessarily sentient intelligence. And it doesn't need to be that way. Superintelligence can simply be surpassing humans in any one task. And then for many, many tasks, we have superintelligence already. Computers are able to play chess way better than we can. They're able to play Go way better than we can. They're able to solve equations and sometimes math problems way, way better than we can. So for those tasks, I would argue that AI is already super intelligent. It surpasses the vast majority of humans. I would say 99% of humans, it can already surpass in countless tasks. So that is super intelligence. The second one is general super intelligence. In other words, being able to surpass humans in the totality of human cognitive tasks. And I would say that we're still not there. I think that the ability of humans to reason, to be grounded, to bring together information from different places, to extrapolate, sometimes from their own physical experience, to think about creative solutions that are beyond what has been done before in any realm, I think that's something that's uniquely human still. So artificial general intelligence, we're still not there. As for this sentient intelligence of having a self-awareness, having a concept of oneself, this becomes a tricky situation. First of all, I'm not sure we want that. I'm not sure we need that. I think we can achieve so much with AI just being a non-sentient, super intelligent companion. And, you know, we could agree not to push the frontiers of sentience. The second aspect, however, is, and there's a lot of philosophical debate for hundreds of years on this, what does it mean to be sentient? Does it mean that you know why you're doing something? Does it mean that you know how you're thinking and you can reason about your own thinking? Number one, in that realm, AI is already able to do that, or at least to fake that, to the level that humans can. You can ask AI, hey, why were you thinking that? And it will reason about its own reasoning, similar to how humans reason about their own reason. But now the question is it faking it? But to that I will answer, are we faking it? And there's a lot of evidence that we are faking it. There are cases of humans with a severed corpus callosum, which is the part that connects the two hemispheres of the brain. When we say about our frontal cortex or about nearly every part of our brain, of our neocortex, is actually there twice. And if you sever the connection between the two halves, each one can reason somewhat independently. And you can ask a patient by showing them, closing one eye and showing them a piece of paper that says, go get a beer in the fridge next door. And then they go and do that. But on the way back, you close the other eye and you now ask them, why did you get the beer? They will say, oh, I was thirsty. So you can think of the brain as an employee who never wants to be caught not knowing. who will make up a story to explain their own behavior. And sometimes is faking that self-awareness. How many times have I gone into a room and picked up the wrong object and come back, continue doing tasks, to only then remember, oh, no, I need this other thing. And then I go back and get that other thing. So our brain will very often make up stories that will explain our world around us and sometimes the world inside us, the actions that we're taking, without being fully on top of things. So maybe we're faking it, and maybe the AI is faking it, and maybe that's fine. And again, philosophers have argued a lot that I know I'm conscious, and you know you're conscious, but you have no idea whether I'm actually conscious or I'm just faking it. And I have no idea whether you're actually conscious or you're just faking it. And again, it goes back to this whole, what is self-awareness? And can we ever be truly self-aware? Can a particular neuron reason about its own reasoning, or can it only reason about the reasoning of other neurons? And so on and so forth. So there's a lot of philosophical dilemmas. We might not even want to get there. And in some cases, the AI can already fake reasoning. And because of all of these layers upon layers of abstraction that modern billion parameter systems are able to have, it is possible that consciousness may have actually appeared somewhere in those neurons, or at least some primitive form of consciousness. Frankly, the same way that consciousness has evolved inside our own neurons. Consciousness is not a magic thing that sits above our head. Consciousness is somewhere in our brain. And the question is, what is the basis for human consciousness? What group of neurons is responsible for that, and what are they doing? And maybe they're faking it, just like the machines are.
So you mentioned you think that AI has already surpassed human intelligence, at least 99% of it, you said. So can it get to the point where we lose control over AI? And if that happens, what might be the consequences?
So let me be clear. I did not say that. I said that for many tasks, for many specific tasks, it has surpassed human intelligence, namely human capabilities for that one task. So I want to be very cautious there, because I didn't say that it has surpassed human intelligence. However, for many of these tasks, it is superior to our capabilities. Did humans stop playing chess? No. Chess is now more popular than it has ever been in the history of chess. More humans are playing chess than ever before. Does it bother us that we'll never surpass the machine? Not at all. So you can think of chess as one of those activities that is training the human mind for strategy, for reasoning, for long-term planning, short-term gains, making a mental model of the opponent, of what they're thinking, of how they're attacking, of being able to distribute resources, being able to sort of have multiple goals, short-term and long-term goals, being able to sort of have distractions and so on and so forth, which frankly train young children to achieve many of the things that they will need as adults. So does that change the relationship that we have with, intelligence? No, we're perfectly comfortable calling a child intelligent, even if we know that machines are way more intelligent than are at those tasks. Now, your question is also, when AI surpasses human, perhaps general intelligence, will it want to take over? Will the Skynet of the Terminator series become self-aware and want to destroy us? And again, the question is, number one, do we want to encode this type of self-awareness? Do we want to program it to achieve self-awareness, which I'm not sure is a necessarily needed goal? And number two, will it have the same desires and impulses as we evolved species have to want to take over? And the answer is not necessarily, unless we program it to want that. So what I would say is that, yes, it's absolutely a risk that malicious goals can be achieved with the help of AI, but that there's always a human in the loop. It's possible that AI will surpass us in many, many individual tasks. It is possible that AI will also surpass us in general intelligence. And in terms of self-awareness, and wanting to, I don't know, eliminate and destroy humans, I would perhaps refer you to the Matrix trilogy of keeping humans around because they're kind of interesting and they can think outside the box and they can, you know, maybe surprise us sometimes. And these syllogisms that Agent Smith has, speaking with Neo, about the machine, you know, trying to figure out what it is that humans really want. And you know, it comes down to that choice of, you know, humans. But again, there's philosophical discussions about whether we truly have choices or whether those choices are in fact the result of circumstances, whether you can predict human choices in the short term, but you can't predict them in the long term, whether by the time we're consciously making a choice, our brain has already chosen and we're just executing that choice. So anyway, there's I think a lot of philosophical debates. I don't have all the answers, and I don't think any of us has all the answers about where this balance lies between humans and machines in consciousness, in, you know, the goals, in volition. Maybe the desire to take over is not necessarily a product of evolution. Maybe any sentient entity sufficiently powerful will decide that humans are a nuisance and they're not even entertaining, like Agent Smith would think. And, you know, maybe in order to answer all of the questions in the universe, the AI will need to eliminate humans first because they're, you know, standing in the way. But I can imagine a scenario where after it has conquered all of humanity or enslaved them or sort of created the matrix, the AI basically realizes that, okay, now I know every answer in the universe. I am kind of bored. I wish that humans were still around. So anyway, we're many science fiction movies away from this. And I think that in the near term, AI can be a force for good. I think that super intelligence in so many tasks is absolutely a goal of my research, a goal of many people's research. And I think it will be needed to elevate the human condition to levels that we have not previously reached. I think that it will allow us to achieve perhaps levels of empathy, of generosity, of altruism that we have never before seen, levels of education, of growth, of kindness, of taking care of the elderly and of our loved ones that, again, have never been before achieved. And I think that having an AI assistant for every working professional, having an AI tutor for every student, having an AI, you know, co-teacher for every classroom, I think will be a net benefit for all of humanity. We still live in a world of limited resources where, you know, energy is not infinite, food is not infinite, space is not infinite, resources are not infinite. And therefore human conflict continues and you know, sort of, you know, there are unfortunately still so many struggles in the world. But I believe AI can be a force for lifting everyone from, you know, the top student in the class to achieve levels unimagined before, to every student in the class to achieve what would traditionally not have been possible in terms of career, in terms of, you know, creativity, in terms of self-fulfillment and self-instantiation. So I'm an optimist. I think that we can truly achieve a lot with the help of AI, improve the path of humanity to levels never before seen, and that we need to be very cautious about the self-consciousness part of AI, because that's the place where some of these unexpected behaviors can sometimes arise. And I would argue that perhaps we don't need self-consciousness.
Maybe next time we can have AI avatar conducting an interview.
Let me call the real Manolis and see what he thinks about that.
Professor Manolis Kellis, thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Joanna, thank you so much for the great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Bye-bye.
Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
From the White House to Gaza, Kyiv to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake and artificial intelligence,
They've got to have a vote and a say.
it's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on The Riz Khan Show for empowering conversation.
Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday on Arabiya News. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up on today's program, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is in Saudi Arabia for negotiations with US officials that are aimed at ending the conflict with Russia. Canada's incoming Prime Minister Mark Carney vows that his country will never be part of the United States and that Canada will win the trade war. And Syria's President Ahmed al-Shara vows to track down those behind the deadly violence in western coastal areas of the country, violence that's estimated to have killed around 1,000 civilians. Hello and welcome to the program. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is gearing up for tomorrow's highly anticipated negotiations in Saudi Arabia. Well, those talks will be between Ukrainian and US officials, and they're aimed at ending the 3-year conflict with Russia. Well, that meeting in Jeddah will be the first between the US and Ukrainian officials since President Zelenskyy's disastrous White House visit last month. Well, today, President Zelenskyy has been holding talks there in Saudi Arabia with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Well, Saudi Arabia has played various mediating roles since Russia's 2022 invasion, including brokering prisoner exchanges and hosting talks between delegations from Moscow and Washington. Well, US officials are planning to use tomorrow's meeting to determine whether or not Ukraine is willing to make material concessions to Russia to end the war. Well, according to Reuters news agency, the US delegation will also be watching for signs that the Ukrainians are serious about improving ties after that heated argument between Presidents Trump and Zelenskyy last month. Well, for more analysis, we can speak now to Matt Terrell, former Chief of Staff for Marco Rubio's 2016 presidential campaign. Matt joins us from Washington once again. Thank you very much indeed for being with us here on Arabiya News. Secretary of State Rubio is heading to Saudi Arabia more or less as we speak. President Trump saying he expects some good results to come out of tomorrow's talks with the Ukrainian side. I mean, overall, do you think it's fair to say the mood ahead of these talks is fairly optimistic?
Absolutely. Look, I think the Trump administration is optimistic going into this meeting. I think they were probably optimistic going into the last one. Obviously, it was not the meeting that they thought they're going to have with respect to that meeting with President Zelenskyy and President Trump in the Oval Office last time. But this is a different time, different place now. And right now, I think it's all about getting this commercial economic deal signed. That's the first step here. I think getting that deal signed, which will be a good deal for the United States because it means that the United States will get paid back for the taxpayer funds that were paid towards this war. It's a good deal for Ukraine. It's going to help Ukraine rebuild its economy. And then finally, I think that this deal, certainly in the eyes of the administration, serves as a security guarantee in its own right. And thus, that will help to get to the next steps of this, which, of course, are hoping to get to a ceasefire. And then ultimately, getting both President Zelenskyy, President Putin, their teams themselves at the negotiating table, negotiate away what's necessary, or I should say, negotiate towards what is necessary to get this war ended.
Yeah, you mentioned that meeting in the Oval Office last month. I think the word disastrous is probably the best adjective to describe it. Would you say that's all now water under the bridge, however?
Well, I think that was then and this is now. And I think, when it comes to diplomacy, it's never easy. Diplomacy is often difficult, but you don't know what you get out of diplomacy until you get to the negotiating table. So I think at the end of the day here, we're seeing one step here in a multi-pronged process. And that step, I suspect right now for the Trump administration, is getting this economic commercial deal signed. And I think they feel very good about that happening. I think this deal will be signed soon, both by President Trump and by President Zelenskyy. And then from there, it really is going into the next steps here. And that is going to be continuing shuttle diplomacy. You've seen the Trump administration deploy shuttle diplomacy throughout this process here. We'll see what takes shape with that. But the first step is getting this deal signed. I do think you're going to have a deal signed here very soon.
Yeah, just what you said in your first answer. I mean, you sort of suggested this minerals deal does contain what we can sort of interpret as being a security guarantee or security guarantees. Just tell us why you think there is some element of security guarantee in the minerals deal.
Sure. Well, look, I think the way that President Trump and his team view this is that deal, that minerals or economic commercial deal, if you will, that will be putting likely here U.S. citizens on the ground in Ukraine. You're going to have business people from the United States on the ground in Ukraine, other people, likely security forces, U.S. citizen security forces, I would suspect, on the ground in Ukraine. So the reality is, if you have citizens, U.S. citizens on the ground there, plus you just have a further stake from the United States on the ground in Ukraine, further investment by the United States into Ukraine, that's going to serve, I think, in the eyes of the Trump administration as a deterrence to President Putin. It's going to make it less likely for President Putin to invade. And I think it gets it more likely that you get to a ceasefire, and even more likely that you get both parties to the negotiating table here. So I think people need to recognize that this deal, this minerals deal, if you will, is not just about the minerals. It's not just about the economics of this or paying back, if you will, the taxpayers of the United States. I think this administration truly believes that in its own right will serve as a security guarantee. It's not the only thing here. Obviously, we have to see what other actors here, such as European countries, do in terms of security guarantees. But from the United States standpoint, President Trump has been clear. He does not want U.S. boots on the ground in terms of troops. He wants to see a security guarantee, I think, through the lens of this minerals deal. It's one component of many components that will be required, I think. We'll see what happens here.
Now, last week, following on from that meeting at the Oval Office that we were just talking about, Washington suspended military aid to Ukraine, as well as intelligence sharing. It sounds like, from what President Trump said, they have just about, to quote him, ended the suspension of that intel sharing with Ukraine. I mean, does that as well help set the tone for a more cordial dialogue between the two sides?
Well, look, I think it helps in terms of the process here. I think obviously what is wanted here, particularly of course from Ukraine, is ensuring that they are able to defend themselves and that there's not continued attacks from Russia. So I think that this is a component that's going to be discussed here, no question, at the meeting. And I suspect it's something that's going to be on the table, of course. But look, I think at the end of the day, the realities are this. This is a war in the eyes of the Trump administration as a war of attrition. It's a stalemate. And, the reality is, in the eyes of the administration, Ukraine's not winning this war. And at the end of the day, the true place you got to get to is the negotiating table. I think what you're talking about right now certainly matters, I think, to Ukraine. It matters in terms of discussions here. We'll see what the administration does. Obviously, they did some pauses here to try and see what, to pause and kind of get to next steps here, particularly as it relates to the economic agreement. But the truth is, it all comes down to negotiation. I think the administration feels very strong about the fact that this war only comes to an end if you get both parties to the negotiating table. That's where I think the bigger elements of these discussions are going to be taking place here in Saudi Arabia. I think it's gearing both parties to get to the negotiating table here.
Yeah, I mean, taking away the intel was obviously applauded by Moscow. Now giving it back again, not likely to be viewed very kindly by Russia. And President Trump saying he's also considering more sanctions on Russia for, quote, pounding Ukraine during the course of the last few days. I mean, sounding a bit friendlier to Ukraine, a bit less friendly to Russia this last couple of days. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think it's fair to say that President Trump, the country that President Trump is aligned with is the United States. He made that very clear in his past statements that what he wants right now is for the killing to stop. In his words, you've seen obviously killing both on the Ukraine side and on the Russian side. the reality is President Trump wants to end this war. He wants to do it in a negotiated way. It's as simple as that. I mean, it's not just with this conflict. You look at what he's trying to do in the Middle East. You look at recently what he said yesterday on Fox News. It relates to Iran. Want to try and negotiate with Iran to stop them from nuclear capabilities. So, look, I think that this is just the mission of this administration. It is to deploy a foreign policy strategy that is centered on negotiation. I go back to that word, negotiation and diplomacy. That's where the president's at right now. So look, I think as you go into these meetings and you go further along in the process here, President Trump wants this war to end, and I think he wants it to end now. But the reality is you got negotiation coming up, you got diplomacy. That's not going to likely be easy, of course. I think you're going to have to, there's going to be a multi-pronged process here. But the good news is it looks like there's progress being made. And I think the first step here, not to be repetitive here, but the first step truly is getting this economic commercial deal signed. After that, I think you're going to see the next steps here in terms of diplomacy really take shape.
In just a moment, we're going to be speaking to the former British Defence Secretary. And with that in mind, I just want to ask you about the fact that British diplomats were meeting with Ukrainian negotiators during the course of the weekend in Kyiv to try to get them ready for the talks in Saudi Arabia. I just wondered how Washington views the role played by the United Kingdom and Ukraine's other European allies. I mean, does the Trump administration applaud them? Does the Trump administration take them seriously, do you think?
Well, look, absolutely. I think he takes them seriously. I think, President Trump had a good meeting with the leader of UK, and I think the administration has good relationships with UK leadership. I think at the end of the day, though, it's about who will be playing what role in this process here. I think the United States views themselves as playing the lead role here in trying to get to a negotiated end of this war. And then, look, there are going to be discussions around security guarantees. And obviously, you've seen President Trump lean into discussions about defense spending. You've seen, these European leaders discuss defense spending as it relates to NATO. So there's other things taking shape here, particularly as it relates to discussions around NATO and defense spending. But as it relates to this conflict, Ukraine-Russia war, the reality is President Trump has been clear that the security guarantee we're going to provide as the United States is going to be, I suspect, this minerals deal, this economic commercial deal. It's going to be through helping to provide negotiation here. And then ultimately, I think he's going to be calling upon European leaders to be the ones, if there's going to be, boots or troops or any of those military kind of elements here going forward, that Europe will have to play that role. Now, again, we'll see what happens here, but that appears to be where the Trump administration is leaning. And I think at the end of the day here, he wants to ensure that this conflict comes to a negotiated end, that this happens in a peaceful manner. His goal here is to get to peace. That's it. And from there, also doing the things that are required under this minerals agreement in terms of the economic elements of it. This is going to be a joint partnership between Ukraine and the United States. Again, I go back to, not to be redundant here, but that deal in itself is the first step here. I think get from that deal, then you get to likely a role of ceasefire, then you get to negotiation. And obviously, since it's the United States will be playing a role in all this, of course, European leaders will as well. Of course, President Trump, as he has been, will be having meetings with those leaders and deploying diplomacy in that sense as well.
Yeah, but I mean, having American people on the ground in Ukraine tapping for valuable minerals is not quite the same as having boots on the ground, is it? I mean, do you think there is a case for having equipped American soldiers on the ground to ensure the peace actually lasts?
Well, I think where the Trump administration is coming from, and frankly, President Trump himself, is that the United States has deployed billions of dollars to this conflict in terms of this war. And I think where he's at is that, if there's going to be the element, the variable of troops on the ground, in his view, I think he views it as Europe playing that role. I think he does truly believe, as his foreign policy team believes, that under this deal, U.S. citizens being on the ground there will matter. And I truly believe that they think that will be a deterrence to President Putin. Now, again, I go back to it's multi-pronged. It may very well be that you have those military forces that are required. But I think at the end of the day, President Trump has been very clear that that's going to be Europe's role, not the United States' role. I think where he is at right now is that the United States will play a role in this in terms of going forward, in terms of security guarantees. But I point back to that deal. That, I think, is really where President Trump is leaning into that deal as being a multi-pronged deal, part of it serving as a security guarantee in its own right. But at the end of the day, again, this is going to be multi-layered to this. This is not a one kind of element of this. There's going to be multiple elements in terms of not just getting to a ceasefire, but ultimately having lasting peace. I think ultimately the goal of the administration, though, is not for this to be a short-term end of this war, but to ensure this war never happens again. This is not going to be a solution or a true end if it's just in the micro. You got to have a macro fix, and that means ending this war now, but also ensuring it never happens again. I do think that the administration feels that this minerals deal, this economic deal, will certainly help with long-term security guarantees. We'll see what happens here.
Okay, I mean, of course, Washington has provided last year 40% of the military aid to Ukraine, but the rest of it did come from Europe. So Europe, obviously, an important voice in all of this. I'm going to be asking the British Secretary of Defence, the former British Secretary of Defence, if he thinks perhaps the Europeans should be trying to get a minerals deal of their own to recoup that other 60%. But just to wrap up our conversation, Matt, I mean, overall, heading into these talks in Saudi Arabia tomorrow, you're hopeful that we're now at the beginning of the end of this war?
I am hopeful. I think the majority of Americans are hopeful. Look, I mean, President Trump outlined his plans on Ukraine, Russia, and touched on his plans in his last speech last week to Congress. Over 70% of Americans, based on a CBS poll, agreed with President Trump's plan or had a favorable view of President Trump's plan on Ukraine and Russia that he outlined in his speech last week to Congress. So I think, look, what we're seeing right now are things that President Trump has been consistently talking about in terms of his vision, his plan for ending this war. But at the end of the day, it's about negotiations, about diplomacy. And as I've said before here, obviously that is not an easy path. I don't think it's going to be done in one day, obviously. I think this is going to be a process, but I'm absolutely optimistic. I think this deal will get signed. And I think from there, you're going to see shuttle diplomacy continue to take shape. I think you will see both parties get to the negotiating table and that this war will be ended. Obviously, this is something that President Trump campaigned on. He campaigned on ending this war. Right now, he's trying to deliver on that. We'll see what happens here.
All right. We certainly shall. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us once again here on Al Arabiya News. Matt Terrell, thanks again.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, the United Kingdom is offering Kyiv advice on how to handle those talks with the United States and Saudi Arabia. Well, the UK Prime Minister's National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, is reported to have spent the weekend in Ukraine, briefing President Zelenskyy ahead of the talks with the United States. Well, the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, is going to host a second meeting this week for leaders of around 20 countries that are believed to have expressed interest in possibly joining a coalition to help Ukraine. Well, that meeting, led by Prime Minister Starmer, will be a virtual one held online. Well, in another development, Moscow has hit out at the UK, accusing London of being, quote, the main instigator of global conflict. Well, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service added that the UK views the restoration of ties between Moscow and Washington as being, quote, a threat. Well, let's get more analysis now. We can speak to Sir Michael Fallon, the former UK Secretary of State for Defence. Thank you very much indeed for joining us once again, Sir Michael. We're just hearing today Moscow pointing the finger at London, calling the United Kingdom the main instigator of global conflict. I just wondered, first of all, why you think the Russians are saying this and why now?
Well, good afternoon. That seems to me to be completely over the top. It's no secret that Britain, along with other European countries, has been a staunch supporter of Ukraine ever since Russia invaded it. But it's certainly a very odd move now. Britain wants to see these peace negotiations succeed. We've supported them in principle. Our Prime Minister has been over to Washington to emphasize that to the President. So we have no interest in prolonging this war. We want to find a just settlement as soon as possible.
But Russia's argument is that London sees the United States and Russia in a sort of a rapprochement phase. And Russia argues that this is a threat to British interests. I mean, is there any argument in this?
No, it's a rather warped logic. It would only be valid if Britain was trying to stop any kind of peace agreement. We're not. Of course, anybody can quibble with President Trump's tactics, but what he's focused on, of course, is bringing the two sides in all this together. And that is what is now happening out in the Middle East. And that matters to us in Britain. In the end, this war has to be brought to a conclusion.
I mean, before I read those comments coming out of Moscow today, I was thinking to myself that President Trump's rapprochement with President Putin could arguably weaken President Putin, because this rallying cry against the West has been a fairly consistent pillar of Moscow's domestic messaging. And with that gone, I mean, couldn't there be a drop in public support for President Putin?
Well, there could well be, and it may be that Moscow hasn't quite woken up, to the disruptive force of what President Trump is doing. But we may be getting ahead of ourselves here. The negotiations haven't started yet. What the president is trying to do and is doing is getting both sides to the table. And that is the only way that you can make a start on this. And I guess there's a long road ahead. It took 2 years to get a peace settlement agreed in Korea. It took 3 years to get a settlement in Vietnam. So between now and any possible ceasefire and then any final agreement on territory or sanctions and the release of Russian assets, there's a long, long way to go.
How strong does Russia look to you right now?
Well, clearly, it's been strong enough to continue the fight in Ukraine and probably could continue it. It's transformed its economy onto a wartime footing. So they are they are able to replenish some of the material that's being used up in Ukraine, and they do seem to have an endless supply of reinforcements. So to that extent, they maintain that kind of superiority of force over Ukraine. Yet, of course, there is damage, and the longer the war goes on, the structural side of the economy, there's high inflation. There are high interest rates, and there is always the risk for those in power that sooner or later there may be serious unrest as to the direction of the country. Not least, of course, because their assets have been frozen abroad. There are sanctions on a lot of the stuff they would otherwise be importing or able to export. And life is not as pleasant there in Russia as it was before the war started.
Ukraine, of course, has had numerous setbacks lately, not least on the battlefield, but one in particular from the United States, well, two in particular from the United States, the suspension of military aid and the suspension of intelligence sharing with Ukraine. But we have heard from President Trump, who said on Air Force One that the United States had just about ended that suspension. I mean, as well as making for more cordial talks in Jeddah, could that make, do you think, is that going to make a significant difference once again to Ukraine's abilities on the battlefield?
Well, I hope, ending the suspension, I hope it will enable Ukraine to better defend itself, particularly against these appalling missile strikes. But I always thought the suspension, was a temporary one. As I said, President Trump is driving both sides to the negotiating table. And you might not like some of his individual tactics in doing that. You might feel some of them are a bit one-sided. But the key thing is that those negotiations have now a prospect of getting started in earnest. And that, in the end, is the only way that this war is going to be brought to a conclusion.
So it sounds like you agree with what President Trump's doing and saying, even if you don't agree entirely on the methodology.
No, I don't agree with some of the tactics and the methodology, and I don't agree with some of the language and the way a head of state like Zelenskyy was treated in the White House. But Trump is right on two crucial points. One is that Ukraine is not going to win this war, even with American help. It's had American help for 3 years now, and it's still not winning the war. And secondly, the Europeans do not have a plan for ending the war. And I think Trump has lighted on those two key points, that in the end, there's got to be a negotiated settlement of some kind. And the sooner we get started on that, and if that means bullying people along, then so be it. Now, certainly you can quibble with the tactics and you can resent some of the strong-arm nature of them. But there's no doubt that those negotiations will now get underway. And I'm more optimistic, certainly, than I was a month ago or before President Trump was inaugurated.
Now, the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, is not from your political party. Just for the benefit of our audience, he's a Labour Prime Minister. He's holding a second meeting of Ukraine allies on Saturday. I just want to get your overall view, how you rate the British government's response to this extremely complicated diplomatic situation and the issues surrounding Ukraine, as well as Russia, and in particular with this second Trump administration installed in Washington. How do you think he's been doing?
Well, first, let me emphasise that the British government has all-party support. The Conservative opposition, the others, are fully supporting the Prime Minister in what he's doing. Secondly, of course, the fact his politics are very different to ours, or indeed to President Trump's, is irrelevant. Britain has a role to play here. We've been a staunch supporter of Ukraine. We're one of the leading militaries in NATO outside the United States. So Britain has to be involved. Now, you may remember 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was talk that this was really going to be nothing to do with the Europeans, or indeed nothing to do with the Ukrainians. This would all be sorted out between the United States and Russia on their own. Prime Minister Starmer and President Macron have ensured actually that is not what's going to happen. The Ukrainians are going to be involved in the negotiations, and the Europeans will have to be involved as well, not least because any settlement that is reached is going to have to be policed to make sure that it's secure. The 2 previous agreements holding back Russia, of course, were broken by Russia. So there is every European incentive in making sure that this time we have an agreement that really sticks.
Yeah, because of course a rushed deal would obviously be unlikely to last. It wouldn't be a lasting deal. But does all of this not just show once again, I mean, this is something we've talked about in the past, but I mean, there has been a long period of heavy reliance by the United Kingdom and Europe on the United States. And I just wonder what you think needs to be done to rectify this. We've heard the British Prime Minister saying they're going to increase the percentage of GDP that is allocated for defence. It doesn't sound like a huge increase. Is he doing enough?
Well, first of all, this isn't just President Trump. Every American president has been saying this for years. President Obama said it in my time when he came to the NATO summit back in 2014 when we agreed to spend 2%. So, the Europeans now, I think, have had sufficient shock from President Trump's arrival and his decision to try and get this war ended to realize that the bulk of the burden of security in Europe now has to be borne by Europeans. So we will see, I hope, not just Britain, but other European countries step up. A third of the alliance, by the way, still doesn't spend the 2% that was agreed 10 years ago. So the Americans are right to be aggrieved by that. So that's really the first priority, is all of us in Europe have got to switch spending from some of the welfare spending that we've got accustomed to over to defence. And secondly, there are a lot of capabilities where we are hopelessly dependent on the United States, whether it's air missile defence, air-to-air refueling, heavy lift, surveillance aircraft. These things we will have to do more for amongst ourselves in Europe, and that means closer cooperation amongst the European defence companies so that we have that capability and we're not always dependent on the Americans, because the Americans feel very strongly now that their number one threat isn't Russia, it's China. And they have to reinforce their own military over in Indo-Pacific. And therefore, we have to pick up the strain in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, it's ironic that sort of post-Brexit, it looks as though the UK could be set to have a more significant role in Europe's collective defence than it did before Brexit. I mean, do you think that's a fair statement?
Well, that's wholly possible, but it doesn't undermine the alliance, the relationship that we have with the United States. I think legally, having had Brexit, we're not being forced to choose. And you see Prime Minister Starmer and the British government at the moment, I think, playing that extremely skillfully, using their influence in Washington and putting themselves as something of a bridge between the United States and the rest of Europe. Now, the rest of Europe, famously, I think was State Secretary Kissinger used to say, when I want to contact Europe, who do I call? The European Union is there, but some of its members are neutral. They're not part of NATO. So Britain, as one of the biggest militaries in Europe, alongside France, Brexit or no Brexit, still will have a very big responsibility and a very big role to play.
And with regards to this idea of having British peacekeeping forces deployed to Ukraine, what do you make of the idea of British boots on the ground there?
Well, I think the Russians will be very uncomfortable with that. And I'd be surprised if they agree to British or French troops, NATO troops, if you like, so close to the front line, wherever that's finally agreed, eyeballing Russian troops. And I think that'd be a pretty uncomfortable position for British troops to be placed in. So it may be that a different kind of security guarantee is required, perhaps a reassurance force, not necessarily on the border itself, more surveillance from the air, and a reserve force ready to deploy if there are serious breaches of any agreement that's reached.
So, Michael, we spoke to your former colleague, Sir Gerald Howarth, last week, who expressed dismay at the state of the transatlantic alliance. And he also described the minerals deal that President Trump was aiming to strike with Ukraine as being, quote, grubby. I wonder what you make of that. Do you agree with Sir Gerald?
Well, first, I think the alliance is in as good a place as it could be. We have a new ambassador in Washington. The president has spoken frequently with the prime minister. Our prime minister has been over there very successfully. So I don't think the relationship Britain has with the United States has been damaged. On the contrary, I think there's some evidence now that the United States is listening to Britain and to France in the way that it proceeds towards an agreement. So far as minerals is concerned, I think, a lot of the Western countries are now focused on the grip that China has and some of the minerals that are essential to our new technologies, to our medicine, to our energy, and to our military. A lot of those minerals are in Ukraine. So I don't think it's any surprise that the Americans have brought that into play. But that's an agreement that they will be pressing on Ukraine, which presumably will be part of a much wider agreement so far as peace is concerned.
Should the UK try and get a minerals deal, do you think, with Ukraine to try and recoup some of the money it's spent on this war?
Well, we're overdue a critical minerals strategy. We too have to be sure now that we can source these various minerals. We've had some very negative moves from China restricting the supply of minerals from China. So we too do need to look and see how we can access minerals. There are minerals in East and Western Ukraine, and who knows what a future agreement may transpire. But we need access to minerals as well. And I think everybody involved is going to have to think very seriously now about how we help rebuild Ukraine, whether that's help with infrastructure, help in modernizing its industry, giving it access to European markets, and so on. And minerals could well be part of that.
Now, you were a defense secretary for a short period during President Trump's first term. I just wonder how you found dealing with him and his administration, and how do you think he is equipped now?
Well, in his first term, he came to office perhaps unexpectedly. He didn't have fully worked out policies. He had instincts. He'd never run anything. He'd never been in government or in public administration. And he didn't know many of the people. He appointed generals, very good generals, but he didn't know them, and he ended up falling out with a number of them. This time, certainly, President Trump has been much more organized. A lot of preparatory work has gone into it. And some of his advisors who came through London last summer were very, very clear about how they were going to move away from Europe and better defend the homeland against their principal threat, which is China. So to that extent, I think Trump too is better organized and better prepared. But you still, of course, see classic Trump ploys at work, the propensity to disrupt, to say quite outrageous things, sometimes to make outrageous moves and then pull back a little later on. You're seeing that to some extent with tariffs, and I hope you'll see that also with the suspension of aid to Ukraine.
So just lastly, to wrap up, I mean, it doesn't sound to me from anything you've said that you're particularly worried about the state of health of the so-called special relationship?
No, I think the special relationship has been through, it's been through its ups and downs. Margaret Thatcher used to have rows with Ronald Reagan, even though they were great soulmates. Prime Minister Starmer is not a soulmate of President Trump, but they've already proved that they can work together. And more importantly, I think Britain has established that we do have to be involved. The Europeans have a legitimate interest in making sure that we can get to an agreement in Ukraine that sticks and that prevents Russia ever again invading another part of our continent.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Sir Michael Fallon, thanks again.
Thank you, Tom.
In other news, the incoming Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is vowing that Canada will come out on top in the trade dispute with the United States. Well, the former central bank boss has also said his country is willing to take the gloves off. Well, Carney was elected by the Liberal Party on Sunday to succeed Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and that transition is going to happen during the course of the coming days. Well, the incoming Premier campaigned on a promise to stand up to Donald Trump.
We didn't ask for this fight. We didn't ask for this fight. But Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves. So the Americans, they should make no mistake, in trade as in hockey, Canada will win. Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, as we know, has put, as the Prime Minister just said, unjustified tariffs on what we build, on what we sell, on how we make a living. He's attacking Canadian families, workers, and businesses, and we cannot let him succeed.
The incoming Prime Minister of Canada. Well, the tariffs feud is not the only factor causing tensions between the two longtime allies. President Trump has also threatened to turn Canada into the 51st state of the United States. Well, Mark Carney said that idea was a pipe dream that will, quote, never, ever happen.
The Americans want our resources, our water, our land, our country. Think about it. If they succeeded, they would destroy our way of life. In America, healthcare is a big business. In Canada, it is a right. America is not Canada. And Canada never, ever will be part of America in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, well, let's get more analysis. We can speak now to Oral Brown, who is a Professor of International Relations and Political Science at the University of Toronto. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Professor Brown. A resounding victory for Canada's incoming Prime Minister Mark Carney in that leadership contest. But it might be the case he's not around in that job for very long. That's right, isn't it?
Indeed. Some would have suggested that this was not really a political contest, but it was more of a coronation within the Liberal Party. And that was the good news for Mr. Carney. But the bad news might be indeed that he will have to face an election, and elections are uncertain. If we would have had an election 2 months ago, the Liberal Party was barely alive. Now, thanks to the confrontation with Donald Trump, the Liberal Party has made enormous gains, and they at least have a chance at winning an election. We will see if Mr. Carney will call an election early, or he will wait until October when there has to be an election.
So you're saying that President Trump has sort of inadvertently handed the Liberal Party a great gift here?
It is really ironic because it's clear with Mr. Trump, it has been said that all politics are local, but with Mr. Trump, it seems to be all politics are personal. And he had such an intense dislike of Justin Trudeau. He kept teasing him by calling him governor. I do not think it was either serious or realistic that he wanted to make Canada the 51st state. He understands that that will not happen. But the Liberals used that very effectively. Mr. Trudeau certainly ran with it. And so Mr. Trump, in a sense, may have fatally damaged the Conservative Party, which would have had policies that would have been much more congruent with the international interests that were enunciated by Mr. Trump when he was running for office. So international politics are full of irony. And also, it is interesting that Mr. Trudeau wanted to create the first post-national state. And in Canada, standing up to Mr. Trump, Canada has become far more nationalistic. So when you listen to the speech by Mr. Carney, it is one of the most nationalistic speeches possible. We are not like the United States. We're going to differ from the United States. We will never be part of the United States. And this is raw nationalism.
Indeed. I mean, just looking ahead to the election in Canada, which has to happen before October, I mean, what are the polls suggesting might happen in that election? I know that we're still a long way off and it might happen in the weeks ahead, but he could presumably hold off on the election for another couple of months, couldn't he?
Indeed, they could hold off on that election. This is the advantage of a parliamentary system, that whoever is prime minister, whatever party is in charge, they get to choose when the election will take place within the time limit that they have. You know, there is a hard stop, so to speak, but within that time, they can take advantage if there's an upswing in the polls. And the trend lines now seem to be favorable to the Liberals. But Mr. Carney will be tested, because the kind of things that he said about the United States, those will come back and make it more difficult for him to negotiate. He, in Canada, wants to present himself as a nationalist. In the case of the United States, he wants to present himself as a responsible partner, someone who already said that he is in favor of rapidly increasing Canadian defense expenditures. This has been one of the key points that Mr. Trump was making, that Canada was underperforming. And indeed, Canada is one of the exceptions now in NATO. We are spending far less than 2%. And Mr. Trudeau, who seemed to have had an aversion to military spending, said that we would not reach that 2% minimum until 2032. Mr. Carney said that we could do it in a couple of years. So it remains to be seen if he's going to do that. But he's got the issue of tariffs. He's got the issue of how he's going to deal with China, and how that will impact relations with the United States, because the Americans do not want goods to come through China, from China, come through Canada or Mexico. So this is like three-dimensional chess. And it's going to be a very difficult ride for Mr. Carney, partly because Mr. Trump is so utterly unpredictable.
Yeah, but when it comes to the economy, Mr. Carney looks a lot like being the right person in the right place at the right time, especially in the face of those 25% levies on Canadian goods. But when it comes to other issues, aside from the economy, what can Mr. Carney bring to the table?
Well, on defense, he can do more, and this could be something that would be pleasing to the United States, that Canada would sharply increase our defense spending, that the slogan, the true north, strong and free, is more than a slogan, that it becomes an actual policy. He has been a banker, so he would understand private enterprise much more than Mr. Trudeau, and he does not carry the psychological baggage that Mr. Trump intensely disliked Justin Trudeau, and the feeling was mutual. But this election campaign also meant that there are statements, words out there by Mr. Carney that Mr. Trump could be very annoyed by, because he's extremely sensitive. And even in terms of the economy, I think this was one of the factors that especially people in the Liberal Party felt, that Mr. Trudeau had so mismanaged the economy that we would benefit from having someone who was a banker, who had expertise in private enterprise. But the Canadian economy is very dependent on trade with the United States. 80% of our trade is with the U.S. So if those trade relationships unravel, then it will be very difficult to have a strong, growing economy in Canada. So the international and the local are intricately linked.
Sure. And I mean, Washington, though, says the tariffs have a very good reason. They argue this is all about that drug fentanyl coming across the border, as well as illegal migrants. I mean, do people in Canada think that this is in any way justified?
No, and this is why I think there's been the surge of patriotism, because the excuses, if you like, given by Mr. Trump ring hollow. There's a very small amount of fentanyl going across the Canadian border. And in terms of the undocumented migrants or illegal immigrants, again, the numbers are nothing compared to what was happening on the southern borders. So we had hoped that we would have been treated differently from Mexico. But Mr. Trump, I think, has had such an intense dislike of Justin Trudeau that he wanted to damage him as much as possible. But in the process, he unwittingly helped revive the Liberal Party. And so we are now at a stage where there are high expectations of Mr. Carney. And this is one of the disadvantages. Yes, he comes in with a lot of momentum, but also tremendous expectations. And it will be very difficult to fulfill those expectations, especially in the light of the fact that there's so many unresolved issues where there are certain legitimate concerns, such as defense, such as protectionism. We protected our dairy industry. We had very high tariffs. Would that be resolved? Steel and aluminum, that's another factor. So it is, no matter who is the leader in Canada, even if, let's say, Mr. Poilievre and the Conservatives managed to win, they're not going to have an easy time. But given the condition of the economy right now in Canada, given the fact that Canada cannot just switch its trade overnight to Europe and elsewhere, given that we are so dependent on this relationship, given that the American economy is 10 times the size of that of Canada, it is sort of like that line from Cervantes where they talk about the ceramic pitcher and the stone, where they say, well, it doesn't really matter. The ceramic pitcher is so vulnerable. It doesn't really matter whether the stone hits the pitcher or the pitcher hits the stone. Is bad for the pitcher. We are the ceramic pitcher. We are much more vulnerable than the United States.
Sure, but with 59-year-old Mark Carney, you've got someone who's been a central banker of not just one country, but two, because our viewers might not know this. He was the governor of the Bank of Canada and the governor of the Bank of England as well. Yes. He's no novice. He could probably outmaneuver, some are saying, President Trump in a trade war. But can he stave off a recession?
Well, the premise would be here that he can outmaneuver Mr. Trump. And it's not easy to outmaneuver someone who has 10 times the economic power that you have. It's so unpredictable and so vindictive. And yes, all that experience with the Bank of England, and obviously he has that international experience. He has business experience that could appeal to Mr. Trump. But there are so many kind of points of contention that anyone, even in the best of circumstances, would have a lot of difficulty dealing with a president in the White House, such as Mr. Trump. And then, there are all sorts of other differences. What are we going to do in terms of our relationship with Ukraine? Canada has had a very strong relationship with Ukraine. We are really committed supporters of Ukraine. Look at the current policy in the White House. And political policy, strategic policy, and economic policy are all intertwined. So yes, that experience indeed may come in useful in certain ways that Mr. Carney is bringing, and I think this was one of the reasons why he won so overwhelmingly. But at the same time, there are so many other considerations. So we will have to see. I think at this point, perhaps we could be cautiously optimistic, but I think that's about the best we can do.
Just lastly, Professor, 1 decade of leadership by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is about to come to an end. How do you think history is going to look back on his 10 years in office?
It's going to be difficult because he wanted to create something new, a post-national state. And that did not really work out. He emphasized relations with Aboriginal people, which was a noble undertaking, but he neglected defense. He did not understand the connection between those two, that if he wanted to have a better hearing in Europe and elsewhere, he also had to deliver on defense. He supported Ukraine, but I don't think he really understood the threat that Russia presents in the Arctic. And we have been slow and late in responding to that. So I think it will be a case of good intentions and very poor delivery.
All right, Professor Earl Braun, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us here on Al Arabiya News.
Thank you for having me on.
Now, Syria's defense ministry announced on Monday the end of a major security operation in coastal provinces. This after days of violence and mass killings that sparked international concern. Well, the violence erupted between Syria's new security forces and loyalists of the former government of the toppled President Bashar al-Assad. Well, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says that close to 1,500 people have been killed in the violence. Well, the new Syrian leader, Ahmed al-Shara, is vowing to hunt down the perpetrators, and he says he will hold anyone who overstepped the new ruler's authority to account. Well, let's get some more analysis. We can speak to Mick Mulroy, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East under President Trump, who joins us now from Montana. Mick, great to have you with us once again. Let's start by talking about those clashes that we saw leading up to the weekend and during the weekend, clashes between gunmen and security forces. What's your understanding as to what caused this flare-up in violence?
So, Tom, it looks like there was elements of the former Assad regime's security forces that attacked the interim government, if you will's forces, and caused this to start. It didn't end with that. It appears by most reports that it resulted in over 1,300 deaths, many of which, if not most of which, were civilians. So there's a lot of very graphic, disturbing videos that have been posted to social media, and it's really, of course, gotten not only the country and the region, but the world concerned about just what direction Syria is going. It's already started a refugee flow again, leaving Syria, going into Lebanon, for example, and it's something that it's going to be looked at very closely in the UN and potentially in these regional meetings that are discussing the matter.
Does this suggest to you that President Bashar al-Assad, the former leader of Syria, who was ousted at the end of last year, does it suggest he still has some influence, some sway over what happens in the country he once led?
It's possible. I mean, we don't know whether he was directing these attacks or this was just done from a small group on the coast, which is the sect that Assad comes from, whether they felt that they needed to do this for their own reasons. It's also unclear whether these were the forces of Ahmed al-Shara, the interim president, if you will, at his direction, or he didn't have a direction and essentially they went on their own. Both are very concerning to the other groups in Syria who are now likely going to just harden their positions and start arming themselves out of concern that this could erupt into yet another civil war inside Syria.
President Ahmed al-Shara has been accusing Iran of having played a hand in this violence in the northwest of Syria. I just wonder whether you're hearing any similar suggestions in the United States.
Yes. So Hezbollah has supported the Assad regime throughout its time when they were in power. So it's likely that they have direct connections to all of these former pro-Assad militias. And it could be, and there is reports that Hezbollah is actively working with them and potentially Iran directly. The IRGC Quds Force could be working with them to create this internal conflict that would essentially push back on the power that was gained by Ahmed al-Shara and his formerly HTS forces, which are supported by Turkey.
Yeah, I mean, most Arab states have rallied around the government in Damascus and expressed solidarity with them. I mean, do you think the new government in Damascus is well supported in the region, with the pretty obvious and notable exception of Iran?
So in the region, with the exception of Israel, I think there's a lot of support. At least there's initial support for Ahmed al-Shara. He has said all the right things, but it's important to point out his background is he was the founder of al-Qaeda in Syria. So from the United States perspective, there's a lot of hesitation to engage, at least in this current administration, the Trump administration, with his government until he proves that he is what he says he is, which is completely reformed and wanting to have a Syria that's inclusive of all groups. This, of course, challenges that, whether he either directed it, and I'm not saying he did, or he could not stop it. That also is troubling to, I think, the U.S. administration, who's going to be looking at just how he reacts to this. It's something I think is going to be a main topic in the Security Council of the United Nations this week.
Up until this point, had the transition in Syria looked largely smooth from where you sit?
Yes, I mean it was a very quick fall of the Assad regime, and certainly an unexpected one, followed by, I think, all the right statements coming out of this interim government when it comes to inclusiveness. There was some concern about statements they couldn't hold elections, for example, for 4 years. But this is something that I think is still in the to be determined category, at least for many in the West, especially the United States, of whether they will allow this to be a government chosen by the Syrian people, by all the Syrian people, or whether this will simply be a replacement for an authoritarian regime. I think from the U.S. point of view, that is still something they are watching very closely. And the horrible images that we saw in events, more importantly, that we saw in the last 4 to 5 days, are really challenging whether this is something that's going to go in the direction of peace, stability, inclusiveness, or whether this is going to surge back into a civil war that further harms the Syrian people.
And the former president, Bashar al-Assad, is all the while, we understand, in Russia, in Moscow. What do you think will happen to him? What do you think should happen to him?
Well, I think he should be held responsible for the massive amounts of war crimes that he committed against his own people, hundreds of thousands of deaths and over 1 million that had to flee. He is the worst perpetrator of crimes against humanity of our generation, and that's what should happen to him. Is he should be held accountable for that. Whether that will happen, it's unlikely. Russia essentially assisted him throughout his regime and is largely responsible for many of the crimes he would be accused of. So they're probably going to safe harbor him for the rest of time if they can.
You don't see him as becoming a bargaining chip, perhaps? Perhaps a pawn to be played, a card to be played by the Russians, who presumably want to maintain a presence on the Mediterranean coast, where they have not just the naval base, but also an airstrip.
That's right, Tom, and a very good question. It shows you the Russians could easily turn against you, and if they believe it's in their own interest, they have that bargaining chip sitting in probably a condominium in Moscow, and that is something that the al-Shara government has said they wanted to do, which is to prosecute, I should say, Assad for the crimes he committed against the Syrian people. So if Russia wants to keep those facilities, as you mentioned, in Tartus and Latakia on the coast, that is perhaps something that they would like to see and be willing to do, is turn over Assad to be prosecuted.
Do you see al-Shara, the president of Syria, reaching a deal with any of the regional powers that we were talking about just a moment ago? I mean, is it less or more likely that he'll strike a deal with Israel or Iran, for example, those being two powers with which there don't seem to be any relations that we're aware of at this stage, as things stand? Do you think that might change?
It's possible. Of course, if he gets the backing of the Arab countries in the region and he continues to carry out what he said he was going to do, again, a reformist, and address the serious atrocities that happened in the last 4 days. Again, over 800 of those killed were civilians, including women. And I think that has to be addressed. But if that happens, and there is a path, a framework toward a government that's selected by the Syrian people, and that all the Syrian people and all the different sections in Syria feel included in the government, then I think there is a way forward that would be much more beneficial to the Syrian people. If that's not the case, then this has the potential to go south in the sense that this could be another civil war, and it could just be devastating. And I think all the regional partners should do what they can to ensure that doesn't happen.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Mick Milroy, always a pleasure.
Thanks, Tom.
Well, that is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Until then, goodbye.
At Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
From the White House to Gaza, Kyiv to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake and artificial intelligence,
They've got to have a vote and a say.
it's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on The Riz Khan Show for empowering conversation.
Hi Scott, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. So we're here at the Festival of Golf. As you can hear, it's all lively in the background. The Live season opener in Riyadh. What are your expectations for this weekend?
Well, first starts with fun and probably ends with families. And so having our first round last night, which was so exciting, it is my first Live event. And just to walk the course and see people smiling, you might hear the music in the background. We have music playing, we have DJs in our neon forest, and we have a fan zone that's to the likes I've never seen before. And the Backstreet Boys are playing tonight. So, I mean, when are you gonna come to a golf tournament, see the greatest stars in the world? You got DJ, you got Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau, Waco Neiman. I mean, it is a who's who of golf and pretty fun.
There's something for everyone, as you said, at the Backstreet Boys. I know a lot of the non-golf fans who are here are looking forward to that as well. There's also another first here. The tournament is being played under lights. What was the inspiration for that?
Well, you know, we have an incredible leader in His Excellency, Yasser Al-Rahman, and he thought, hey, what an incredible opportunity to play at night. It'd be the first time it's ever been done before. We're in Riyadh, which is wonderful for television back in the US. You might know we have a new deal with Fox, so it puts the broadcast times in the right zone. It gives the players kind of an opportunity to test and try something new. And we have stars in this league that want to do something different. And I think it gives us an opportunity to showcase innovation, do something new and fun, and hit some broadcast windows in the US that are helpful.
Of course, absolutely, and we'll get to that point on Fox in a moment. So here it is, it's growing as a golf hub. What is the main driver behind that? Obviously, Liv is hugely involved in this. Where do you see the game growing over the next 5 years?
Well, there are so many incredible golf projects in the kingdom. I mean, you have Daria Gate, the project Greg Norman designed. You have what's happening in Qadiyah with those two beautiful courses down there. And it was just with a gentleman from Neom, which seems like that's going to be incredible too. So first off, it starts with the quality of golf courses. You clearly have commitment in this market. They continue to showcase, as we have here, a spectacular golf course and continuing the fandom to build. And I think that momentum is really going to help us for the next 5 years.
Absolutely. What are your favorite aspects of the Live model? Obviously, like we've got the music here behind, the team aspect. Why do you think that is growing at such a fast rate in comparison with the PGA? Average age of the fans in the PGA is in the 60s. The average age of Live fans is now in the 30s. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite aspect is the team aspect. I was with Sergio Garcia yesterday having lunch, and he was talking about how passionate he was about helping his guys, Luis and Puig and Ibrahim, kind of emerge and develop. I mean, and that to me is the specialness of this model. You have the greats of the game with an opportunity to kind of carry forward this next generation and help them emerge, not only as professionals and elite golfers, but also as human beings. And I think that's what brings me the most joy.
And kind of speaking about the human being aspect, I was lucky enough to walk the course behind Bryson DeChambeau last night, at Cameron Smith, at Dustin Johnson. These guys are just incredible.
You can't believe how athletic they are, right?
Yeah.
Like Bryson's drives, DJ's raw athleticism, and Cam's short game, you actually got to see it all. Like that is the best of the best on display.
Yes, and that is why, so like in terms of viewership, obviously you're competing against the PGA. As you mentioned earlier, you've just signed the deal with Fox as well as ITV in the UK.
It's a wonderful deal.
You're really starting to compete now for viewership with the PGA. This must be very exciting.
Yeah, I prefer like kind of co-opetition. I mean, I think all of us in the golf ecosystem, a rising tide lifts all boats. I don't think we're getting anywhere near scratching the surface in terms of the opportunity we have to drive more fans, golfers and non-golfers alike, into this golf family. Our household viewership opportunity in the 100 countries where we're broadcast is almost 800 million homes.
Wow.
And so, so we have such opportunity ahead and such good momentum so far. And I'm rooting for the PGA Tour to do really well. I'm rooting for the DP Tour to do really well. And Live is what I'm really passionate about.
And you yourself have had an incredible career, obviously in the States. You've managed some of the biggest sports franchises in the world. What fundamentals from managing those are you going to bring into Live to help further the game for Live?
Well, the fundamentals are very similar. If you look at the business model here, it's TV, and so we've made some good progress as of late. We have a ways to go, but incredible progress with Fox and ITV, among others around the world. Our sponsorship base, if you don't have to look too far, then over my right shoulder to see Madden come in as one of the top. It's one of the 6 largest mining company in the world with a world-class CEO. Riyadh Air, Roshan, and our good friends at Bahri. So we have a great sponsorship base, and that's going to have to continue to grow around the world. But we've had such incredible support from the region here, which has been great. And then, look, we need more people coming. We need more people watching, reading, wearing our merchandise. Get this vest at a store near you, and experiencing this incredible hospitality. So I would just encourage you to give it a try. If you have a chance to come out and see a Live event, it is probably like no event you've ever been to in your life. It is fun, it's engaging, it's family friendly, and you get to see more stars than you see in any constellation in the sky.
Agreed about that. It was incredible last night. So you have come into Live at somewhat of an interesting time. Obviously, there's a lot of talk of allegiances with the PGA as well as the DP World Tour. Are you the man to achieve that goal? Is that something you want?
It never has been, never will be, it never could be about any one person. This is led by our incredible chairman. We have an incredible staff. And we have a golf industry that, as they say, inshallah, is actually pulling together and wanting to do what's best for the game of golf, to grow the game of golf, to come together and to make sure that everywhere around the world, golf fans are satisfied with what they're getting in terms of coverage and access to events.
President Donald Trump has recently met with the PGA Commissioner as well as Adam Scott, who also works for the PGA, to discuss a potential merger. There has been a lot of talk about this. Donald Trump has said on his campaign trail that in 15 minutes and one phone call, he could get a deal done. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are that if the leader of the free world is spending his time on golf, I am very happy. This game matters. It's one of the great life teachers in the world. It gives values that this world needs more of right now. It brings us together with connectivity. It gets us outside. It gets our phones in our pockets. It teaches us integrity and resilience and consistency, all things we all need to be successful in this world. And if there's commitment for all sides to bring the game together, which is good for the game of golf, I couldn't be happier.
Have you spoken with Trump?
I have not.
Okay,
but we are playing at his golf course in Miami in a few weeks. So you know.
And he is a fantastic golfer, obviously, with kind of break 50 with Bryson, who's obviously doing huge numbers online. That's been incredible to watch. Yeah. Another point, the US Championship announced on Wednesday that it will accept players from LIV. This is a huge coup, isn't it?
Well, I don't know if it's a coup. The RNA announced this similarly today. So for the Open Championship, we'll see the same in Northern Ireland this year. So very exciting. For us, is, you know, when you look at, when you consider the majors, the biggest stage in the world for the biggest stars in the world, and it's obviously the Masters at Augusta and the PGA of America, PGA Championships, and then the US Open and the Open Championships. They want the best stars in the world, and we have quite a few of them. And so I think when there's an opportunity to put those two things together, good things will happen. And we're really pleased and grateful and appreciative of this, you know, the olive branch and the step forward. We've got great leaderships in the organizations that matter, and we're thrilled to be a part of it.
I'll just end on quickly. Do you have a favorite golfer who plays elsewhere that you would like to see in LIV?
No. I have one favorite golfer. That's my father-in-law. I have to love him for something.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to seeing him on the course soon.
Okay, good. You will soon.
Thanks so much, Scott. A pleasure.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, Cam. Thanks so much for your time.
No worries.
So we're at the beautiful at Riyadh Golf Club here for the first LIV opener of the season. What are we expecting?
Well, it's going to be different this time around. We were here back in December for the International, and that was a great event. We're playing it under lights this time. I think it might be a little bit tougher just because the ball's not travelling as far. It's a little bit colder at night. And then just kind of the depth perception, I think, at night is a little bit different as well. So it'll be an interesting week, one that I'm looking forward to. And, you know, every time this time of year comes around, the first event of the season, everyone's hyped up and ready to go. So we can't wait to get started.
And even going back to your point, obviously, it's been played at night, it's been played under lights, even for the judging of the greens, and even as an amateur golfer who's not that good, I mean, it must play a huge part, even for lies as well, and especially on the greens. How are you preparing for that?
Yeah, I think, like you said, the longer stuff is, you know, pretty much the same. I think when you get around the greens, the bunkers, the rough, if the ball sits down a little bit, all becomes a little bit, it's just not what we're used to, just a little bit harder to judge. The green slopes, I think the pace of putting will be very difficult this week. Yeah, so all stuff that we're trying to get prepared for, but is all very different.
And so being here in Riyadh as well, this has had a huge effect on the popularity of golf here. How is it in your perception?
Yeah, I think, you know, I've come to Saudi now for 3 or 4 years, and every time I've come here to an event, there's been more and more people, and I think that's a great thing. You know, that's what we're trying to do out here.
The next event is in Adelaide. It's on your home turf. How excited are you for that? I know it was a ripper last year, as you'd say.
Yeah, no, obviously can't wait to get back home. It's always nice. You know, I think having the home ground advantage there is nice as well. You know, it's what we grew up on, and really what we're used to, and what we, you know, fell in love with the game for. So can't wait to get back there. It's always a great time. It's a great tournament. I'm very biased. It's my favourite tournament I think I've ever played, but it's always exciting to get back down to Adelaide and bring world-class golf down there. Absolutely.
So in order to go back to your point on the love of the game, we've heard Rory McIlroy say, obviously, there's 39 events on the PGA. Mm-hmm. Here it's 14. They've said they're a bit overburdened, overworked. Do you feel the schedule is better with LIV?
I do enjoy having an off-season. You know, going down to Australia is something that I've kind of missed throughout the years. Being able to play a few more events down there, you know, bring back golf to Australia and try and make it more popular, and better for the future. So there are definitely some benefits to having an off season, you know, kind of doing what you want and spending more time at home is never a bad thing.
And better for the future, as you say. You've got the Cam Smith scholarship system as well. So that must fill you with great pride to bring obviously 2 players every year over to Florida. How much are you enjoying that?
Yeah, it's been awesome. It's something that I do really enjoy. And I think, you know, as much as the kids learn off me, I feel like I learn off them. It's always nice to, you know, just have a fresh mindset on things. You know, the kids play with such freedom and, you know, we were able to bring them to Chicago last year and they had a great time around the team and even hitting balls and doing putting on the greens and stuff. They loved it. So it does bring me a lot of joy.
So Tom McGibbon, obviously, as you spoke about young players, he's only 22. He's joined Liv. Rory McIlroy said, bit of a mistake, he was saying, at this age to be joining Liv at such a young age. What's your take on that?
I mean, again, I'm biased. I think it's great out here. I think it'll be great for him to develop his game around, you know, he's on John Rahm's team. He'll spend a lot of time around him, seeing what he does, and obviously being such a great player and spending time around other guys as well. I think it's very different out here with the team environment. You know, you maybe get some tricks of the trade off John and the rest of the team, and you know, hopefully makes him a better player. And I think this is a great spot for him to be.
And in terms of being a better player, we've seen you had some great results at the Masters. With that coming up, is there a green jacket coming your way?
I mean, I hope so. It's been one that's been very close to me a lot of times. I feel like I've done a lot of work this off season and in Australia to kind of prepare myself for the event. So hopefully I did all the right things and it can work out this year.
Absolutely. We've heard as well in the media that you and your wife are expecting your first child. Would you like your child to get into the professional golf world?
Geez, it's so hard to say so early, but I mean, it'll definitely spend a lot of time around the game. You know, hopefully it falls in love with the game the way I did as a kid. You know, I always look back on what my parents did for me as a kid and just going out there and enjoying the game. So maybe it'll be a little bit different being around some kind of high stress scenarios, but absolutely. I think it's the best game in the world, and you know, maybe not even professional golf, but just being able to go out and have a hit with your mates and you know, spend some time. It's unlike anything else. So
just to finish, I've got an Australian producer who said I have to ask this: are you Ford or are you Holden?
Oh geez, that's a great question. I wasn't expecting that, to be honest. I was going to say like league or union or league or AFL or something, but I was brought up in a Holden family, so I'm a Holden fan through and through, and I love cars, so I've had a couple of Holdens in my time, and yeah, always Holden.
You heard it here first. Cam, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Hi there, Sergio. Thanks so much for your time. It's a pleasure to have you. So what can we expect here from your golf this week?
Well, we're super excited about it here at Riyadh for the first time with Live Golf for the league and playing at night. So it's going to be something new, something very, very exciting for not only us, the players, but I think the people watching, all our fans and everything. And you know, we're looking forward to it. So it's something that it's never been done before in a full tournament, and you know, it should be a great experience.
How does the prep change in terms of reading greens and the lines? How long have you been practicing under lights now in preparation for this?
Well, we've been here a couple of days practicing a little bit. It is a little bit different because the light is different. It's different than the sunlight, obviously, that we're used to playing in. But you know, at the end of the day, it's the same for everyone. So everybody's got to figure out their own way and see who gets it right the most. And you know, but I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is it's gonna be something new, something exciting, and that's what we're always trying to do. You know, bring new and exciting things to the game of golf.
And speaking of getting it right, it was you and your team who got it right in Spain last year. How special was that, winning on home soil?
It was super special to be able to win in Spain for us, being mostly a Spanish team. It was super special, and to be able to it was our fourth win as a team, but to be able to make it my first win as an individual, it was, you know, the cherry on top. So you know, it was a great week, and we're super excited to come back and defend our titles there.
And speaking of Spain, obviously a country with huge sporting prowess, especially in football. Obviously, Saudi have just been awarded the 2034 World Cup. How excited are you for that?
Yeah, it's always exciting. I think that at the end of the day, the most important thing is to expand all the games, all the beautiful games we have in the world, and expanding everywhere in the world. And you know, obviously we saw Qatar getting it a few years ago, and now Saudi is getting it for the future. So I think it's great. It shows, you know, how all sports are growing everywhere. And you know, I know that everyone here in Saudi are super excited about the possibilities that they're going to have. And you know, you can see their league is growing, and you know, they're obviously investing and doing a good job at that.
And you've been invited to the PGA Championship this year, the first time you've played in that since 2022. Obviously, it's been a little bit difficult for the LIV players. Do you imagine going forward it's going to get easier?
I hope so. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I'm super thankful that because of the way I played last year, I got invited back to the PGA Championship. It's one of my favorite majors, and I'm super excited about going back, without a doubt. I think that at the end of the day, I think what, you know, in my personal opinion, what the majors want is the best players there, and obviously we have a lot of those great players that deserve to be in a lot of those majors. The only thing we can do is kind of keep playing well, keep representing our game the best way possible, and then you know, the majors will make the decisions in who they want playing in them.
So you have the most points in Ryder Cup history. You have recently paid your fines to DP World. You hope to be selected. How important is that for you this year?
Yeah, I love the Ryder Cup. Everyone knows that. It's my favorite event of the year of in golf, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I think that you know, we're members of the European Tour again, of the DP World Tour. That was the first criteria to be able to be eligible to be a part of the Ryder Cup. And now it's going to depend on how I play throughout the year, and hopefully, you know, with the amount of tournaments that I'm going to play, hopefully if I play really, really well, I can make it on my own. If not, then obviously I will depend on a pick from the captain, from Luke Donald. But we'll see. The only thing I can do is play the best golf that I can play, and then see where that kind of puts me.
And this is the first time in the Ryder Cup history that players from the US are going to be paid to represent their country. Do you think players should be paid in order to represent their country?
Look, I think at the end of the day, for me, as a European, we've never thought about that. We never even, not even mentioned it, but we never even thought about it. So I've never been on that, you know, on that side of the spectrum, I guess, and it's something that I don't think about it. What I want to do is be a part of the Ryder Cup, and that to me it's honor enough to that, you know, nothing else matters. So that's the way I see it. And
obviously, being an Irishman, I have to ask, it's being held in Ireland in 2 years at the magnificent Adair Manor Hotel. You very much see yourself playing in that, opposed to being the captain.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to be playing still. Obviously, there were some talks about maybe the possibility of me being the captain there. But you know, obviously, my focus as of now is on playing and hopefully making a few more Ryder Cups if my game is good enough. And when that doesn't happen, then we can try to focus on other things. But I don't want to think about that until I know that I'm not good enough to be a part of it.
And at a day when you're not good enough, I can't imagine that being anytime soon. What are your plans after golf?
Well, I mean, we still obviously here with the firewalls and everything. I have a stake on the team, so obviously I will be very involved in that, trying to make the team grow as much as possible when I'm not playing. Then I've started doing golf course design, so there's several things, and then we do a lot of great work, my wife and I, with our charities in the US, in Austin, and trying to help as many people as we can that need it. And so there's plenty of things that we can do, not only financially or as a business, but also on helping people.
We look forward to it. Thanks so much, Sergio.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Ian Poulter, the first thing I'd like to ask you, this is going to be played under lights. The first time a tournament has ever been played under lights. How has your preparation been for that in terms of, obviously, you've got the lies, you've got the greens. How's that prep been?
It's been good. It's been, for me, half man, half mattress. I like to lay in. So obviously teeing off at 6 p.m. Is going to be very different. But from a golf playability perspective, it's new, it's innovative. Like when you see it as it is now, it looks very different at night. So it's going to be a good test for us all, I think, to be able to, really kind of pick your lines off the tee visually. It looks a little different at night to what it does in the day. So get your homework done over these few days to, to be able to select, exactly where you want to hit it. And it's a challenge, but it's a great challenge. The lights obviously very different. Standing there, you'll have the odd shadow, kind of, which you have to get used to when you're setting up over the ball. But I think it's brilliant. I mean, I think for us to, showcase live golf and do it in a slightly different way and make it a bit more fun, you'll see that over the coverage. It'll be awesome.
And speaking about live golf, obviously, the live opener is here in Riyadh for the first time. Everyone's talking about it. How excited are you?
I'm very excited. I think all of us, we've played obviously before Royal Greens, but for us to come to Riyadh, I think is special. Live Golf themselves, concerts on all throughout the weekend, which is fantastic. And, it's great to be able to get a little bit more culture here, to see the city and, take it all in.
It's well documented your fashion sense on the course. Are you planning any glow in the dark?
Well, no glow in the dark. Castor, our new sponsor, we're pretty proud to obviously launch that this week. It'll be the first time, out in the new gear this week. So, yeah, I feel, even though it's not quite bright colours, but it looks great. We're very, very happy with our new clothing sponsor.
So, as competitive as golf is now, we're obviously going into a Ryder Cup here. You're known as Mr. Ryder Cup. Do you ever see yourself coming back into the fray? Obviously, there's talk of Donald Trump. He said in one phone call in 15 minutes, he would get a merger done. I know it's not going to be a merger. It's going to be an investment from LIV into the PGA. Is that ever possible? I know a lot of fans, they'd love to see you back.
Look, never say never, right? As it stands today, that isn't an option for me. But look, things change quite quickly, like we've seen, in the golf landscape. So let's see how things play out. You never know.
Michael Jordan has said the one thing he's afraid of on a golf course is Ian Poulter. What are you afraid of on a golf course?
What am I afraid of? Well, I've never played against Michael, so I wouldn't know if I have to be afraid with him on the course. But maybe one day I'll get that opportunity to take him on. That would be quite fun. But no, there's nothing really that I'm afraid of. I don't like snakes. I don't like, those animals with no shoulders. That's about the only thing I'm afraid of.
You heard it here first from Michael Jordan. The challenge has been set. So that would break a lot of numbers on social media. Obviously, if you've seen Bryson DeChambeau has done amazing things on YouTube with his Break 50 series.
Yep.
Do you have any plans to engage the world of social media in your own way going forward?
Yeah, I think in the not too distant future, you might see a digital channel coming out. So you'll have to wait and see.
Ian Poulter, thanks so much.
Pleasure.
Hi Henrik, thanks so much for your time. So how has the prep been? Obviously this is the first tournament that's ever going to be played under lights. How has your prep been?
I think coming over from the US, I've tried to stay a bit more on a different time zone. We're going to be playing late at night, so staying in my US time zone schedule is making it a little bit easier. I've played every practice round has been played under the lights. Haven't had a lot of experience prior to this week, so we made the most of it. Played Monday night, Tuesday night, playing again tonight. So we should be accustomed with the with kind of the slight challenges on the odd thing, you know, with the shadows and so on. We sometimes get it playing late in the afternoon as well. You can have sunset and so on, and how you see certain undulations on the greens and so on. But in the bigger picture, it's been fine. I think it's going to showcase really well on TV. I haven't seen any footage from the event so far, but I can imagine it's going to look really cool, and it is a different experience. And I think the people that come out here and everyone watching is going to get a different feel for it.
And how about in the off season in terms of normal practice? Do you tend to play once a week? Do you not want to see a set of golf clubs at all? Are you still honing your skills in the off season?
Yeah, I've certainly been playing more in daylight in the off season. We've had a long off season, which is something I really enjoy with my current setup. I've been traveling the world for many years, and you feel like 1 year has kind of tagged into the next one and so on. And to really have that time to first decompress a little bit, put the clubs away, and then you have time to start up and do both proper gym work and get ready physically and feel rested mentally. So when you're taking on a new season, you feel like you're ready to go. And I've had my team over in Orlando. We've practiced, and I've always been a player that tends to practice more than I play. But with my son, almost 15 years old, he likes to play quite a lot. So I think in the last couple of years, I've tend to switch over a little bit and do a bit more practice playing than maybe I used to back in the day.
Well, it's probably good for him and it's good for you. Would you like your son to follow in his father's footsteps and be a professional golfer?
Yeah, we'll see if he can make that happen. I think he's got his sights set on college. He's still got a few years before that, but he wants to play college golf, and he's turning into quite a nice little golfer himself. So we'll see if he can make it all the way out on the tours.
So, speaking of players that have had obviously their main goals, Rory McIlroy has always wanted to win the Masters. Do you think he's there yet? Do you think we're ever going to see that?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, Rory is obviously a phenomenal player, done so many great things in the game. I know he's got one of the majors left to go for a Grand Slam, the same as Jordan Spieth got one as well. So that's obviously what the natural target for both of those players. So I'm never going to say that someone can't do anything, and that's obviously a quest of his. And come April, I guess we'll see.
There was one quote from Rory. He said that Tom McKibben, obviously he's just joined Liv from the PGA. He's only 22 years old. Rory said that may be a bit of a misstep at his age. What are your thoughts on that?
I think everyone's going to make the decision they feel is the best for themselves and their careers. And I'm not one to tell anyone if they should walk left, right, or centre. So each one to their own. And obviously I saw him the other day and wished him welcome here to Liv, and another young, exciting player to follow and watch. And of course, I'm going to try and beat him when I have the opportunity.
Of course. And then to just finish on, so there's always talk amongst, well, especially in interviews, who would you have at a dinner party? Your 4 favourite guests. Who would you have as your guest on a 4-ball on the golf course?
On the golf course? Well, I don't want to disappoint my son, so I guess he's going to have a spot in there, and then I'll take some of the all-time greats. I'll take Jack Nicklaus and Ben Hogan.
Great, it's a very good choice. The very best of luck this weekend, Henrik.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
From the White House to Gaza, Kyiv to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake and artificial intelligence,
They've got to have a vote and a say.
it's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.